Hey guys, imagine striding into your icy Scandinavian morning, wearing a tunic that smells faintly of smoked fish and sheep fat because deodorant won't be invented for another 900 years. That's the everyday runway look of our Viking farmer, a man who tills soil all day and raids England only on alternate weekends. Today we're peeling back the woolly curtain on Viking high fashion, where the catwalk is literally a muddy field, and last season's look is whatever didn't rot in the longhouse corner. Before you get comfortable, please hit like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do. Drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's dive together into today's journey. Picture dawn breaking over a fjord. A thin, suspiciously gray sun climbs the horizon. Our protagonist, Eric the probably frostbitten, yanks himself out of a straw mattress infested with more fleas than people in the nearest hamlet. He stretches, scratches, and shuffles across a dirt floor toward a chest whose hinges squeal like dying pigs. Inside lies his wardrobe, 2 wool tunics, one brown, one a different shade of brown, plus a pair of trews that have been patched so many times they now qualify as a quilt. Somewhere beneath that pile lurks his prized belt buckle, hammered iron, slightly bent from an incident involving a runaway goat and too much mead. Eric's first decision of the day: which tunic will tell the village, I have ambition? The lighter brown, obviously. Lighter colors communicate sophistication, or at least they would, if anyone could wash them. Soap is boiled animal fat mixed with ash, which smells exactly how you think it smells. As he scrapes yesterday's dried mud from the hem, he wonders if today might finally be the day he meets a nice local shield maiden. But then he remembers Ragnar's funeral feast 2 moons ago when he spilled barley stew down the front and created a vaguely rune-shaped stain. He shrugs. Runes are trendy. Maybe the stain is destiny. Beneath the tunic goes a linen shirt, assuming you can call the shredded linen rag a shirt. Linen is precious because flax doesn't exactly thrive in subarctic soils. Most farmers reserve it for high feasts, weddings, and the rare Wednesday when the wind is warm enough to bathe without dying. Eric gingerly threads his arms through the holes, murmuring a prayer that no mice chewed larger ventilation gaps overnight. The linen scrapes his skin like icy fingers, but he's grateful. It's the only fabric that feels remotely smooth against months-old calluses. Next up, leg bindings. Those mysterious woolen straps that spiral from ankle to knee like budget compression. Socks. They keep his trews tucked and protect shins from brambles, but mainly, they proclaim, I have both legs and I'd like to keep them. Eric winds them clockwise. Clockwise is essential, lest the village gossip circle accuse him of being too lazy to bind properly. Each strap end tucks beneath itself in a move equal parts origami and desperation. If executed poorly, the bindings unravel at midday, making him look like a drunken octopus. Footwear. Viking shoes are universal. One piece of cowhide folded like a sad pastry and stitched with gut thread. They last about 2 weeks before turning into damp leather lasagna. Eric slides them on anyway. His other pair dissolved last winter when he stepped into something historians politely call liquid manure. To cushion the inevitable blisters, he stuffs in dry grass. Fashion tip: grass is free, plentiful, and doubles as insulation. Downside: you're literally walking on hay all day. One stray spark at the hearth, and you become the village's first mobile bonfire. Over everything, he clasps his cloak, a rectangle of wool fastened with a penannular brooch. It's dyed a heroic reddish brown, courtesy of madder root in the village dyer's optimistic spirit. True red requires expensive imported pigments, so reddish is close enough. Cloak length is a delicate social signal. Too short, and it screams, I grew last year and can't afford fabric. Too long, and it drags in mud, announcing, I don't actually work. Eric's cloak hits mid-calf, the Goldilocks zone of Viking nonsense. Brooch choice reveals either wealth or the ability to pilfer wealth. Bronze for common folk, silver or gilded bronze for those who scored big on a raid. Eric sports a simple iron circle with a flattened pin that's permanently bent. Some claim iron wards off trolls, but mainly it wards off the embarrassment of losing your cloak in a strong gust. He pokes the pin through the fabric, twists, and promptly pricks his thumb. A bead of blood wells up. free accent color, runway ready. Now Eric heads outside, where the icy air immediately reminds him that fashion and frostbite are lifelong lovers. He trudges past his neighbor, Gudrun the Practical, who's wearing the exact same ensemble except her leg bindings are color blocked with leftover blue yarn. People will talk about those bindings for weeks. Blue dye comes from woad, which requires tedious fermentation and the pleasant aroma of rotting cabbage. Wearing blue says, "I'm fancy enough to smell bad on purpose." Eric contemplates jealousy, but decides smelling like sheep is simpler. He meets his brother at the byre, and together they herd stubborn cattle toward a frost-crusted field. As they walk, they gossip about Bjorn's new fur-trimmed hat. Fur trim is the seasonal detail, assuming the fur is fox or ermine rather than whatever was lying dead near the barn. Rumor has it Bjorn traded 3 perfectly good spears for that hat. Spears are valuable, they earn you silver abroad and respect at home, but fashion demands sacrifice. Somewhere nearby, Bjorn is likely posing against a tree, pretending he's not slowly going bald from lice. Mid-morning, Eirik notices Inga the weaver, spinning wool outside her longhouse doorway. She's wearing an apron dress held up by tortoise brooches, oval alloys nicknamed for their shell shape. These brooches anchor strings of glass beads sourced from Frankish traders. Bright beads are the Viking equivalent of Instagram likes, shiny, enviable, possibly overpriced. Each bead color signals something: green for fertility, amber for protection, black because she likes a little edge. Scholars insist those beads indicate networked trade routes across Europe. Inga insists they indicate she's amazing. Both are correct. She catches Eirik staring, raises an eyebrow, and flicks her spindle in a gesture that says, "Your tunic stain is still weird." He blushes beneath his beard. Beards, by the way, are huge, literally and socially. Groomed facial hair proves you possess both virility and the fine bone comb necessary to keep lice at bay. Lice combs are status symbols, carved antler with teeth like shark fins. Everyone carries one on their belt, ready to scratch at any sign of bugs. Nothing says romantic intrigue like pausing mid-conversation to delouse your chin. Lunchtime arrives. The men hunker behind a turf wall, gnawing barley bread so dense it might qualify as self-defense. Between bites, they debate whether goatskin mittens will replace wool gloves this season. Goatskin is tougher, but acquiring it involves coaxing a screaming goat into a corner and negotiating with its horns. Eric wonders if fashion is worth bodily harm, then remembers he already punctured his thumb and shrugs. Yes. Afternoon tasks include repairing a fence using willow withes, flexible sticks synonymous with rustic chic. Willow is versatile. You can weave fences, baskets, even crude snow boots. Last spring, rumor spread that Sven the opportunist was shaping willow into decorative wrist bangles for the spring market. Wrist accessories are big among young Vikings who'd rather flirt than farm. Unfortunately, Sven's prototypes gave everyone splinters. Trend over. Sunset bleeds pink across the fjord. As Eirik finishes mucking the byre, he contemplates his evening ensemble. He could switch into his darker brown tunic, the fancy one with minimal goat bite holes. But social events tonight are limited to sitting around the hearth complaining about taxes, called land guild, and praising Thor that nobody died of dysentery today. He decides changing is pointless. Fashion is about audience, and the sheep don't care. Inside the longhouse, torchlight flickers across rows of shield decorations hung along the wall. Each shield bears painted designs, chevrons, serpents, sometimes crude anatomy drawn by bored teenagers. Paint is made from egg whites mixed with ochre. If the yolk accidentally slips in, congratulations. You just invented smell-based deterrent against raiders. Shield art doubles as conversation starter. A farmer with a green serpent motif signals he once sailed on a westbound raid, returned alive, and now milks cows for fun. Eric's shield shows a faded boar, symbol of courage, or possibly his appetite. Supper, root stew seasoned with salt so scarce it could be used as currency. Salt stains tunics white, so wearing a salt-speckled garment is unintentionally bragging you can afford seasoning. The chieftain's wife, Astrid, encourages everyone to lick their fingers instead of wiping on sleeves, preserving fabric dignity. Eric follows suit, wishing dignity tasted less gritty. After dinner, the chieftain announces a feast in 3 moons to celebrate returning traders. Immediately, whispers rattle the hall. What will everyone wear? Feasts are the Oscars of Viking rural life. This means frantic sewing, swapping, and possibly stealing decorative trims. Tablet weaving becomes a competitive sport. Tiny card-woven bands of geometric patterns edge cuffs and collars. The narrower and more intricate, the more likely someone will ask for your hand in marriage, or at least borrow your goats. Inga produces a sample band from her pocket, red and yellow diamonds so tight they could double as rope. Eric nearly chokes on his ale. If he could afford half that skill, he'd sew it onto his cloak and strut like a rooster for months. Bedtime nears. Eric removes his cloak, shakes out straw bits, and hangs it on a peg near the fire. The smoke will fumigate lice overnight, a smoky sauna that doubles as natural dry cleaning. He lies on the straw mattress again, now slightly warmer from body heat and communal snoring. As he drifts towards sleep, he envisions the upcoming feast, strings of whale oil lamps, sloshing ale horns, and the dazzling moment when he might debut a brand new tunic dyed in, dare he dream, actual blue, the color of imported woad and unreasonable ambition. He smiles against the straw, hoping tomorrow's plowing will uncover a buried silver hoard to fund his fashion dreams. More likely, it'll uncover rocks. Still, in Viking society, optimism is as essential as wool underwear, occasionally itchy but better than frostbite. And so Eirik sleeps, planning how he'll impress with leg bindings so snug they could strangle a goose in a brooch polished until it almost shines. Among Viking farmers, that's haute couture. Morning again in the fjord, and Eirik wakes up with a stiff neck, a straw splinter in his cheek, and a suspiciously moist patch near his feet that he hopes to the gods is melted frost. He's not entirely sure whether it's Thursday or doomsday, but the cows are mooing, which means it's time to dress like a semi-respectable man who's going to argue about fish prices all afternoon. His tunic still smells like last night's turnip stew. He sniffs it and flinches. Yep, still wearable by Viking standards. No visible mold means it's a good day. He grabs his leg bindings, which have frozen into the shape of his calves overnight, and uses his teeth to soften the wool just enough to unwind it. Outside the longhouse, the temperature is just north of fatal, so he throws on a second cloak, coarser, shaggier, and dyed a heroic shade of accidental gray. But today's not a regular workday, it's market day. Once a month, the nearby village of Stanvik hosts the most chaotic spectacle known to Norse civilization, a barter bonanza of sheep, salted cod, suspicious-looking beads, and unsolicited marital proposals. It's not just a place to swap chickens for grindstones, it's the catwalk of the fjords. If you're going to Peacock, this is your stage, and Eirik, bless him, is ready to risk frostbite to turn heads. First stop, the mirror. Okay, no, not a mirror. Those won't show up until the Renaissance. His reflection comes courtesy of a polished bronze plate, so warped and scratched he looks like a melted wax figurine. He flattens his beard with spit and a horn comb, carved by a man with 5 fingers and 0 artistic restraint. The comb is more aggressive than effective, pulling out tufts of beard with each stroke, but pain is temporary, image is eternal. To complete the ensemble, he grabs his showpiece, a bright green cap dyed with imported nettle extract. It cost him 3 rabbit pelts and a small portion of his dignity. It itches like betrayal, but everyone notices a man in color. In a sea of beige, green means, I have ambition or possibly scurvy. He hikes the icy trail to Stenvik with a few other villagers. Along the way, they rank each other's outfits with the polite brutality of a Viking roasting session. Is that a new tunic, Thorleif? Asked Eirik, eyeing the man's shockingly clean cuffs. Nah, Thorleif replies, grinning. Just turned it inside out. Reversible fashion. Genius. Eirik files that away for future emergencies. The market explodes into view over the hill, a swirl of reindeer furs, blue-dyed veils, and every brooch style from passed down by grandma to looted from a monastery last spring. The air smells like fish, tallow, and ambition. Music blares from a half-drunk bard who's pounding a skin drum and singing about cows. Everyone's pretending they don't see him. As Eirik strolls past stalls, he eyes potential upgrades. A man from Gotland is selling wool dyed a deep indigo. rarer than sober raiders. Another merchant hawks antler buttons shaped like miniature boats. Buttons are luxury. Most Vikings just use leather loops or hope the wind behaves. Real buttons say, "I've traded with people who bathe." He fingers a fur collar stitched from squirrel pelts. It's soft, warm, and makes him look 15% more successful. But the price? 2 silver coins, or 4 hens. He checks his pouch and finds 1 rusted nail, a broken clasp, and a dried apple slice. Barter it is. He approaches the merchant. "1 nail," Eric says, "from a Saxon shield." "2 bent," the man replies. "Symbolic," Eric counters. "Still bent." They settle on the apple slice and half a promise to help build a new roof come spring. Eirik ties the collar to his tunic and instantly feels more powerful. Or maybe just less drafty. Nearby, a crowd gathers around Fridas the weaver, whose stall is stacked with tablet-woven trim in dizzying patterns. Her fingers move faster than gossip. Red zigzags, gold loops, black diamonds, each one tighter than Eric's hamstrings after plowing season. Fridas wears a triple-pleated apron dress with appliqued horses, braided hair, and an expression that could curdle milk. She is, in a word, intimidating. In 2 words, terrifyingly fashionable. Eric clears his throat. "I'll trade for that red and blue band." "You have anything that doesn't smell like goat?" she asks, not looking up. "I have this green hat." Fridas peers at it. "It's leaking dye down your neck." "That's the look," Eric says, lying through his wooden teeth. She rolls her eyes and tosses him a slightly frayed band. "Wear it with confidence. Maybe no one will notice it's old." He wraps it around his forearm like a bracer. Suddenly, he's not just a farmer. He's a man who owns decorative trim. He could probably lead a minor expedition now. Lunch at the market means herring, flatbread, and whatever you can chew with missing molars. Eric joins a bench of similarly dressed disasters and watches as Bjorn the fashionably foolish appears in a sleeveless tunic. Sleeveless. In winter, his biceps gleam with sheep fat. His cloak is trimmed with ermine, allegedly. Someone mutters that it's just weasel. Someone else claims he skinned it himself. The debate continues as Bjorn flexes dramatically near the mead tent. Later, a traveler from the south arrives. He wears trousers with pleats. Pleats. Actual folds of excess fabric just for style. The crowd goes silent. Even the cows stop moving. The traveler speaks in broken Norse, but his clothes say everything. Imported wool, waxed boots, and a gold thread belt that probably cost the GDP of 2 fishing villages. Kids follow him like ducklings. Older men scoff. Secretly, everyone's impressed. Back home that evening, Eirik undresses by firelight, taking inventory of the day's conquests. He's down 1 apple slice, but up 1 fur collar and half a reputation. His beard is now decorated with 2 beads, 1 amber, 1 bone. He tells himself they match, even if one came from a game piece. He lays his cloak on the sleeping straw and gently folds his new trim band beside it. He wonders if he can turn it into a headband, or maybe edge his tunic cuffs. Either way, he knows people will notice. And if they don't, he'll tell them anyway. But before sleep takes him, Eric has one final worry. What if next market day, pleats catch on? That night, he dreams of color-coded leg bindings, antler sunglasses, and Bjorn strutting shirtless across a frozen lake. Fashion is war, and Eirik is officially enlisted. The following week begins with a blizzard so aggressive it feels personal. Snow whips sideways through the valley, and every Viking farmer becomes a walking furball of regret. Inside Eirik's longhouse, breath hangs in the air like ghostly complaints. The goat sneezes, the child sneezes. Eric sneezes and swears it echoes off the fjord. He wraps his second-best cloak, slightly less crusty than the first, around his shoulders and debates the eternal question. Should he wear 2 pairs of leg bindings or risk fashion over function? He goes with the latter. It's not bravery. It's that the second pair smells like fermented wool and betrayal. By midday, the storm eases and village life resumes, which means surprise wedding. A neighbor's cousin's daughter is getting hitched to a slightly bewildered woodcutter from the next valley, and this event requires, brace yourself, ceremonial dress. Viking weddings are less royal elegance and more we're out of mead, time to chant. but appearances still matter. Guests scramble to wear their finest: linen tunics with the fewest patches, fur hats that still have ears on them, and jewelry that doesn't smell like fish. It's a rare social moment where you might lock eyes across the fire pit and think, their brooch is symmetrical. Eric naturally panics. He pulls out his formal tunic. It's blue, faded blue, veering toward depressed gray, and bears a mysterious stain shaped like a chicken. He throws it on and begins the delicate act of accessorizing. A leather belt that's somehow both too tight and too long, a single bronze pin in the shape of Thor's hammer, actually a spoon that broke, and the now slightly unraveled trim band from Freydis the Weaver. He considers the squirrel fur collar. It's a power move, but is it too soon? Is he that guy if he wears it twice in 1 week? Then again, if he doesn't wear it, someone might think he sold it for soup. The stakes are unbearable. Ultimately, vanity wins. Collar on. At the wedding, the guests form a semicircle around the altar, which is really just an upright log and some moss, and the bride appears wearing a long woolen dress with woven shoulder straps and a belt full of keys. The keys symbolize that she now controls the household. Also, they make a great sound when she storms off in anger. The groom looks like he got dressed during a house fire. His cloak is inside out. His beard is frozen in 2 directions. But no one says anything. He brought smoked reindeer to share, and that buys a lot of silence. Eric finds himself sitting next to Aldo the fishwife, who is wearing a necklace made of small bones and, he swears, a single human tooth. She eyes his collar. "Is that squirrel?" she asks. Possibly weasel," he admits. "Bold," she says. "Most men wouldn't dare." This is the closest thing to flirting he's experienced since the harvest festival of 870, when a girl winked at him before vomiting into a hay basket. During the feast, roasted lamb is passed around alongside flatbread you could use to shingle a roof. Someone spills meat on their lap and tries to play it off as ceremonial anointing. Children run between guests with greasy hands, leaving trails of lamb fat and social chaos. Then, the dancing begins. It's less choreography, more chaotic stomping mixed with shouted poetry and the occasional thrown shoe. Eric joins in cautiously, worried about tearing his tunic seam, which already popped open once during a dramatic sneeze. He attempts a twirl. His collar flaps heroically. A toddler claps. It might be mockery, but he'll take it. By nightfall, the fire pit has claimed several cloaks, 2 hats, and at least 1 sense of dignity. Eric stumbles home with a belly full of goat cheese and half an onion stuffed in his pouch. His trim band is frayed. His collar smells like bonfire and betrayal, but his pride intact until the next morning. He wakes to find his tunic stiff from mead stains, his beard beaded with ice, and, worst of all, his precious fur collar gnawed at the edge. He confronts the usual suspects. The goat looks innocent, too innocent. The child is asleep in a bucket, and the dog won't meet his gaze. He sighs. Fashion in the Viking age isn't just fleeting, it's actively under attack. A few days later, he visits the old widow Ragna, known in the village as the one who knits with curses. She spins wool with the intensity of a volcano and dyes fabrics with techniques so secret even she forgets them. Her house smells of wet sheep and despair, and it's the only place within 3 valleys where you can commission something truly unique: personalized embroidery. Eric brings her a basket of eggs, only 3 cracked, and a songbird feather he found last summer. She grunts and agrees to stitch a runic design into his next tunic. It'll be a protective charm, supposedly, but also a flex. Anyone can wear wool. Only the confident wear letters. "Do you want it to say strength, courage, or I've seen death and it blinked first?" she asks. "Can you just write not Thorleif's?" Eric says. She nods. Very fashionable. In the meantime, Eric experiments with layering. He tries wearing 2 tunics at once, one sleeveless over the other. It gives him the silhouette of a barrel, but does offer warmth and a sense of modernity. He calls it the warrior look, even though he's more likely to battle mud than men. One night, after hearing a saga sung by a traveler from the east, Eric is struck with inspiration. In the story, the hero wears a belt made from twisted horsehair and coins. It jingles when he walks and frightens his enemies with its sheer audacity. Eric immediately starts gathering materials. 3 weeks later, his statement belt is complete. It features horsehair from a horse that did not approve, 4 bent copper coins, and a fragment of something possibly Roman. He wears it to the next gathering and waits for reactions. Thorleif squints. "Are those coins?" "Yes," Eric says. "It's symbolic. Wealth, fortune, legacy." "They're all cracked." "Symbolic," he repeats. But then Freydis the weaver nods in approval. "It's dramatic," she says. "I respect that." He nearly faints from validation. Viking fashion isn't about beauty. It's not even about comfort. It's about survival with flair. You don't wear antler pins or colored cloaks because they're practical. You wear them so that when you're trudging through 6 feet of snow to attend a funeral for someone you barely liked, someone else might think, "Damn, that man knew how to wear wool." Eric returns home that night feeling like a trendsetter. He's got a personalized embroidery order pending, a belt that jingles like arrogance, and a growing reputation for being that guy who wore green. But as he drifts off to sleep, the wind howls, the goat farts, and a mouse makes off with one of his bootstraps. And somewhere in his soul, he knows the battle for Viking fashion never ends. Spring arrives late and grudgingly in the fjords. The snow melts not so much with grace as with resentment, flooding trails, soaking cloaks, and releasing 6 months' worth of mud, bones, and forgotten socks. Eric stands outside his longhouse with one boot buried to the ankle in sludge, wondering if he should start charging rent to the mushrooms now growing on his porch beam. He's also wondering what on earth to wear to the spring blot. The blot is not just a sacrificial feast to appease the gods and ensure a good harvest. It's the event of the season. You show up underdressed, you're remembered. You show up overdressed, you're immortalized. For a Viking farmer, this is as close as one gets to the Met Gala. Except instead of paparazzi, there are chickens, and instead of champagne, it's mead you hope wasn't brewed in a bucket that previously held entrails. Eric pulls out his newest tunic, the one with the runes embroidered by Widow Ragna. It's dark brown, almost purple in the right firelight, and the stitches spell out not Thorleif's in harsh, angular runes. A subtle jab, a fashion statement, a legal disclaimer. He layers it with a cloak dyed in uneven blue, thanks to a dyeing process involving crushed berries, lye, and possibly black magic. It smells like death but looks like effort, so it's perfect, now, accessories. He grabs his jingle belt, coins slightly less bent, the squirrel fur collar, now mended and brushed, and a fresh pair of leg bindings, this time striped with woven green, a technique he learned after nearly setting his hand on fire, trying to boil lichen for color. Then comes the final flourish, a brooch shaped like a wolf's head, carved from bone and stained with soot. It's not symmetrical, one eye is bigger than the other, but that's okay, neither are his. At the blot, villagers gather in their finest. Freydis the weaver arrives in a red overdress with golden tablet woven trim that actually reflects the light. People stop and stare. She nods politely, knowing full well she's slaying. Thorleif shows up in a new tunic that's suspiciously similar to Eric's old one. Like, identical, same seam tear, same mystery stain. He's turned it into a vest by removing the sleeves. Everyone knows what he's done. No one says it out loud. That's the code. The sacrificial fire is lit. A chicken is waved overhead. Chants are chanted, and the gods are presumably judging everyone's outfits. Eirik stands tall, resisting the urge to adjust his belt every 5 seconds. The jingling helps. Then comes the dancing, again, more stomping, slightly more coordinated. Eric catches himself bobbing to the beat, letting his belt swing rhythmically. His embroidered tunic catches Freydis' eye, as she raises an eyebrow. "Very brave," she says, gesturing to the runes. "It's also accurate," he replies. Then someone starts a competition. Who can name the most foreign fabric types they've never actually seen? "Silk," shouts one. "Cotton," cries another. "Velvet," someone lies. Eric, emboldened, yells, "Translucent linen from the east." Everyone gasps. No one knows if that's real. It sounds scandalous, and possibly breezy. Later that evening, half drunk and full of dried fish, Eirik wanders down to the riverbank. He sits on a log, letting his feet dangle into the frigid meltwater. He's a farmer, a weaver's rival, and a man with the second best fashion sense in a village of 27. He reflects on how far he's come. Last year, he didn't even know how to spell his name in runes. Now, he's got them sewn into his chest, literally. He used to wear tunics until they disintegrated. Now, he plans his wardrobe by season. He used to laugh at brooch collectors. Now he owns 3. He spots a duck and considers if duck feathers could be turned into shoulder decoration. Dangerous? Maybe. Daring? Absolutely. Back at the village, the party has devolved. Someone set fire to the table where the mead was kept. A dog is wearing a discarded cloak, and 2 boys are jousting with broomsticks over a piece of smoked eel. Fashion, like Viking life itself, is unpredictable, messy, and occasionally stupid. But it's yours? Eric rises, his boots squelch, his cloak flaps, his belt jingles faintly as he walks into the misty fjord night like a man who knows deeply, that he looked fantastic while slaughtering that ceremonial chicken. The next morning, with a hangover the size of Jotunheim, Eric begins crafting something new, an armband made from twisted sheep gut and dyed leather, decorated with small bone charms that clink when he moves. It will smell terrible, it will probably itch, and he will wear it with pride. Because in Viking fashion, discomfort is temporary. Bragging rights? Eternal. Imagine paying good denarii to be slathered in olive oil, scraped like a parmesan rind, and then dunked in water that's been marinating in other people's sweat since sunrise. Welcome to Spa Day in ancient Rome, where luxury means sharing a steam room with 60 strangers and at least 2 philosophical arguments about goat prices. Before you even glimpse the baths, the city assaults your nose with a bouquet of fried dormice, incense, and that unmistakable aroma of, did a donkey just explode nearby? You push through the form, dodging senators and togas that cost more than your entire insula apartment block until you reach the massive brick walls of the Thermae of Caracalla. They loom like a palace, because they basically are, funded by taxes you didn't know existed and manned by slaves who definitely wish they were somewhere else. Inside the entrance hall, everything is marble, echo, and ego. Busts of emperors glare down as if daring you to develop acne. Mosaics depict tritons and nereids frolicking in cerulean waves, a cheery reminder that your own bathwater will be less Mediterranean blue and more suspiciously beige. But you're here to unwind, right? First stop, the apoditarium, the changing room, also known as the place where your belongings go to vanish. Hundreds of niches line the walls like pigeonholes for sandals, tunics, and personal dignity. You hand your bundle to a slave attendant, tip him with a copper as if that will guarantee your stuff's safety, and try not to think about how many lost togas are fueling the second-hand clothing economy. Now naked except for self-consciousness, you shuffle toward the palestra, the open-air exercise yard. Roman wellness doctrine says you must earn your relaxation by sweating through calisthenics that look suspiciously like military drills. Gladiator and training types are flipping heavy sandbags the size of small cows. An old senator's grandson practices discus throws but mostly achieves public endangerment. You attempt a light jog. Within seconds, cobblestone blisters bloom on your feet and a philosopher lounging nearby mutters critiques about your running form. Once you've perspired enough to season a stew, a slave hands you a curved metal scraper, the strigil. It's basically a bronze squeegee designed to drag oil, dirt, and self-respect off your skin. But don't scrape yet. Oh no. First comes the anointing. Another attendant approaches with a jug of extra virgin olive oil so fresh it might still believe it's a salad dressing. He pours it over your shoulders until you resemble a glazed ham, then massages it in with hands that feel startlingly practiced. You're half relaxed, half wondering if he's mapping your organs for resale. Greased and glinting, you step into the caldarium, the hot room. It's a domed chamber where steam hangs so thick you could carve your name in it. Marble benches line enormous plunge pools that bubble ominously, heated by a furnace beneath the floor, tended by slaves who are probably counting the minutes until one of Rome's 1,200 public holidays. The temperature hits you like an elephant wearing a wool cloak. Your pores open, your brain fogs, your eyebrows threaten to melt off. Various elites recline against the walls debating stoicism while their slaves fan them with palm fronds in an environment best described as subtropical hell sauna. Every few minutes someone dunks themselves in the scalding pool, surfaces beet red, and proclaims the gods have blessed their humors. A doctor, Reed, a man with opinions and a ring, claims the heat expels black bile. You mostly feel it expelling your will to live, but endure you must. Tradition says the longer you stew, the healthier you'll be. Besides, exiting too soon marks you as a delicate barbarian who probably eats unfermented fish sauce. When you finally stagger out, woozy and parboiled, a slave with the strigil goes to work. He scrapes from neck to heel, forming little rivers of oil, sweat, and city grime that collect in a basin at your feet. This sludge, by the way, is sometimes bottled and sold as athlete's ointment to gullible sports fans. You vow never to shake a gladiator's autograph hand again. Next comes the tepidarium, the warm room, a merciful halfway house where you can still breathe without scalding your lungs. Mosaics underfoot depict dolphins leaping around tridents, delightful distractions from the fact that the floor is heated by the same furnace that just tried to poach you alive. You lie on a stone bench while an attendant rubs perfumed oil into your limbs, myrrh for status, rosemary for circulation, and a scent called nard that smells like a bouquet left too long in the sun. He casually plucks a stray body hair with a practiced flick. Apparently smooth skin is now a sign of refinement. Never mind the infection risk. A trumpeter somewhere signals the hour, which means it's time for the frigidarium, the cold plunge designed to shock your system and allegedly seal your pores. The hall is vast, columns soaring, water shimmering and inviting but deceptive turquoise. Patrons stand at the edge, psyching themselves up. A burly ex-legionary cannonballs in, emerging with a howl that rattles the ceiling. You inhale, curse Jupiter, and dive. The cold punches your organs into your throat. Your soul briefly files for emancipation. But when you surface, sweet relief. You're awake, alive, and your skin feels like polished marble. That's about to chip. Post-plunge, you wrap in a woven linen towel the width of a toga but 10 times more absorbent. You wander to the Unctarium, the spa's final indulgence station. Here, cosmete, skilled beauticians, offer depilation via resin-based wax that they rip off faster than a tax collector's handshake. They pluck stray eyebrows with bronze tweezers, apply lead-based foundation for that chic pallor, and sprinkle your hair with gold dust if your coin purse jingles enough. One matron requests crushed pearl exfoliant, another demands a facial made of crocodile dung and rosewater, swearing Cleopatra swore by it. You settle for a safer pomegranate seed scrub, ignoring the rumor that it's mixed with ground marble from a demolished temple. Finally, you're led to the Laconicum, a dry sweating room hotter than Vulcan's forge. No steam, just blistering air and a vague smell of pine resin. It's supposed to tighten the skin and fortify the spirit. Mostly, it evaporates what remains of your body fluids. A poet beside you faints mid-ode. He's dragged out, revived with watered wine, and returns to finish his verse on the beauty of misery. Emerging dehydrated but oddly buoyant, you reclaim your clothes, miraculously intact, and tip the attendant a coin you hope is genuine silver. You exit into the Roman afternoon, skin shining, limbs rubbery, senses overwhelmed by fresh bread, donkey brays, and political scandal shouted from a street corner. Tomorrow you'll be filthy again, but for one glorious hour, you're a living statue, a greasy masterpiece of Roman wellness philosophy. Scrape, sweat, shock, repeat. And as you limp home past aqueducts and insula, you realize the spa was less a retreat and more a civic duty wrapped in marble and hippocaust fumes. A place where emperors and plebeians briefly simmer together, seasoned by olive oil and unified in the shared conviction that suffering, when properly organized, is astonishingly relaxing. So now that you've survived the basic Roman bath cycle, and your pores have seen more drama than a toga party at Nero's house, it's time to level up. Because believe it or not, Roman spas weren't just about soaking and scraping. No, this was ancient Rome. Nothing was ever that simple, especially not relaxation. This was wellness with layers, political layers, philosophical layers, sometimes literal layers of mud and fermented fish sauce, depending on how much you paid. We begin with a visit to a more elite establishment, one not open to the great unwashed masses unless they bribe someone or look convincingly upper class. The private balneum of a wealthy patron is smaller, quieter, but no less dangerous to your dignity. Here, luxury means being massaged by a Syrian slave who used to be a doctor, then exiled for malpractice involving leeches and a senator's mistress. You arrive with an invitation written in purple ink. because nothing says indulgence like the color that bankrupted emperors. The atrium smells of frankincense, spilled Falernian wine, and ambition. You're greeted by a doorman who informs you your name has been written on a wax tablet alongside such social titans as Gaius the Grain Baron, Livia, she invented eyebrow threading, Cornelia, and a poet who only speaks in hexameter, and once bathed with a peacock. The caldarium here is no ordinary boiling chamber. It has mood lighting. Torches flicker behind thin marble screens carved with erotic mythological scenes, because why not steam yourself in the shadow of Aphrodite giving Poseidon a foot rub? The water isn't just hot, it's infused with herbs. Thyme to boost memory, lavender to soothe stress, wormwood because someone read a scroll about its aphrodisiac properties and now it's trendy. Instead of strigils made of plain bronze, these are inlaid with silver and shaped like dolphins or lions, depending on your favorite god. The slave assigned to you offers a menu of scraping options: gentle, firm, or make me forget my sins. You choose the middle ground and still end up redder than a centurion's cloak. Now onto a treatment that sounds innocent: Phylonica facial rejuvenation. Sounds fancy, right? Well, here's the fine print. It involves an exfoliant made from leftover laundry soap, used in Roman Philoniki, the public laundries. And what was their key cleansing ingredient, you ask? Human urine. Yes, really. Collected from jars in the street where passers-by politely donated their contributions. Why? Because urine contains ammonia, which lifts stains and, as some wildly confident beauticians claim, also lifts your spirit. You lie back while a cosmetia, think Roman esthetician with the confidence of an oracle, gently dabs your face with this golden elixir of sanitation and madness. This will make your skin glow, she says. You wonder if that's glow as in radiant or glow as in radiation. Either way, your pores are open to interpretation. Next up, thermal mud therapy. This isn't the cute spa day mud you know from modern magazines. No, this is volcanic sludge from the Bay of Naples, harvested by slaves wearing nose plugs and optimism. It's spread over your body like you're being prepared for a sacrificial offering. The mud is said to detoxify the soul, align the humors, and possibly cure heartbreak depending on the lunar phase. While it dries, you're expected to reflect on your life, your status, and whether or not it was wise to eat raw oysters at breakfast. After the mud cracks like poorly baked bread, it's scrubbed off with woven goat hair mittens, not soft mittens. Number. These were clearly designed by someone who wanted to exfoliate their enemies. You emerge scratched, slightly offended, but undeniably cleaner. Now it's time for the perfumed oil steam, a vapor ritual beloved by patricians who think smells can cure trauma. The room is heated by scented coals. Yes, scented coals, infused with imported oils from Arabia, Nubia, and somewhere even the mapmakers gave up on. As the steam rises, attendants wave fans to circulate the aroma. You inhale deeply. The experience is somewhere between falling into a potpourri basket and getting tackled by a bouquet. Here, you'll likely overhear conversations so bizarre you're not sure if it's the incense or actual madness. One woman swears that bathing in milk reversed her aging. A nobleman insists he dreamed of Venus last night, and now refuses to bathe without rose petals blessed by a Vestal Virgin. A philosopher proposes that true cleanliness comes not from water, but from understanding one's filth. No one really argues with him, mostly because he hasn't bathed in 3 weeks and the irony is lethal. And now, a quick stop at the Barbarus Tonstrix, the spa barber. You'd think it's just a haircut, but in Rome, everything escalates. First, your beard is trimmed with knives sharp enough to shave a mouse. Then, he flosses your teeth with horsehair soaked in wine vinegar. Finally, he offers you the Caesar special, which involves a scalp massage with onion juice, goose fat, and hope. It's allegedly a cure for baldness, though most Roman busts suggest otherwise. Once your head smells like a rejected stew, you're ushered to the reading lounge. Not for books, mind you, scrolls. You lie on a stone recliner as a slave reads excerpts from moral philosophers, erotic poetry, or if you're unlucky, Cicero's legal speeches. Some clients request romantic fiction, others satire. You ask for silence and are handed a scroll of Marcus Aurelius. You don't know whether to feel inspired or completely existentially annihilated. The final flourish in today's luxury itinerary? A diet treatment. You're offered the spa menu featuring detoxifying delicacies such as pickled fish guts and vinegar reduction, honeyed locusts on barley wafers, sheep's milk yogurt infused with rue and crushed oyster shells, and of course, wine. Always wine, usually watered down, occasionally fortified with herbs meant to realign the stomach. You eat delicately, which is to say, you nibble one barley wafer and wonder how many emetics this meal will require to process. The staff assure you this is cleansing. You feel betrayed by your taste buds. As you stagger back toward the changing room, a familiar scent hits you. Olive oil, always olive oil. It has followed you like a loyal dog, soaking into your very essence. You are no longer a person. You are a shiny, slippery vessel of Roman self-care rituals that somehow involved equal parts indulgence and pain. You retrieve your clothes, miraculously unstolen, and leave the balneum more confused than relaxed. But that's the Roman way. Beauty is suffering, cleanliness is questionable, and luxury is very, very weird. Still, you can't help but admit it. For a civilization that brushed its teeth with crushed bones and thought fermented fish sauce was a beverage, they really knew how to make personal hygiene feel like an imperial power play. And as you walk away, glowing faintly in the sunset like a human candle of lavender and goat hair, one thought lingers. Tomorrow, you might just come back. Because in Rome, even suffering is seductive, especially if it's followed by wine, flattery, and a good old-fashioned scrape. You'd think after being steamed like a dumpling, oiled like a salad, and exfoliated like a marble statue, your journey would be over. But no. In ancient Rome, the spa wasn't just about the body, it was about the soul, which sounds nice, until you realize that to cleanse the soul, you're about to endure some of the most baffling treatments ever devised by people who believe sneezing was a sign from the gods. We begin today's journey in the sudatorium, the sweat room's sweatier, angrier cousin. This place isn't just hot, it's aggressively hot. Imagine sitting inside a bread oven that whispers judgmental Latin in your ear. The goal here isn't just to detox your body, it's to purge your sins, your memories, and probably a few brain cells. You sit in silence among others who've paid good money to hallucinate. The temperature climbs until your fingernails feel like they're sweating. One man claims he's seen the goddess Minerva in the steam. Another begins chanting in Etruscan. A third simply weeps into his towel. You're not sure whether you're spiritually ascending or just deeply dehydrated. When you finally crawl out of the inferno like a soggy croissant, you're greeted by a spiritual hygiene consultant, a priest/life coach who offers an aura brushing. This involves waving branches of laurel and fig over your head while muttering prayers to gods you've never heard of. He then spits wine on your feet to seal the blessing. You thank him politely, then tip him in coin and confusion. Next stop, the exotic animal therapy suite. Yes, that's exactly what it sounds like. Wealthy Romans, never ones to settle for normalcy, began importing rare beasts as part of their spa regimens. You've heard of therapy dogs? How about therapy snakes, or falcons? Or in one deeply questionable case, a lemur trained to pluck your nose hairs. Today, you're treated to the sacred goose massage. 2 geese, sacred to Juno and absolutely full of rage, are gently placed on your back. They are supposed to walk on you, activating pressure points. What they actually do is honk aggressively and peck at your shoulder blades. You remain still, hoping this counts as penance for your entire life. After the birds are shooed away, and you're given a linen wrap for your dignity and peck wounds, you're led to a room that smells strongly of resin and regret. This is the resin wrap chamber. You're slathered in pine sap and wrapped in linen like a mummy on a juice cleanse. The staff leave you alone in total darkness while rhythmic lyre music plays from a nearby alcove. Your thoughts during the session go something like, what if this is how I die? Did Julius Caesar ever do this? I smell like a tree and I'm oddly okay with it. After you're unwrapped, a process that takes 3 attendants and a lot of olive oil, you're scrubbed down with pumice powder, Roman pumice being not just for feet, but also for arms, shoulders, and even your tongue. If you are particularly foul-mouthed that day, you decline the tongue service. But the Roman wellness journey wouldn't be complete without addressing the mind. You are escorted to a philosopher in residence, seated on a stool shaped like a sphinx. His toga is stained with wine and the burden of knowing too much. He offers you a mental spa treatment known as stoic decompression. Why do you fear death? He asks immediately. You say you don't. Then why did you flinch when the goose bit you? Checkmate. For 30 minutes, he reads you selections from Seneca while staring into your soul. Occasionally, he throws in a joke about the impermanence of life and the futility of luxury. You nod along, even though you're mainly wondering if he's ever bathed. After your spirit is shattered and rebuilt through deep existential dread, it's time for a lighter touch. Cosmetic enhancements, not surgery. That's too messy. Instead, Romans indulged in ancient versions of makeup, skin dyes, and illusion. You're offered lead-based whitening powder, guaranteed to make your face glow, literally and toxically. Kohl eyeliner applied with a stylus sharp enough to write your will. Crimson beet juice blush, which smells like soup but looks divine. A unibrow extension made of glued goat hair. Beauty standard, Frida Kahlo meets Forest Witch. After your face is transformed into what can only be described as aggressively elegant, the beautician presents you with a mirror. Polished bronze that distorts your face just enough to keep your self-esteem afloat. You look like a combination of a fallen god and someone who's been assaulted by a fruit basket. Just when you think the torment is winding down, they bring in the singing therapist. Yes, singing therapy. A woman in a diaphanous gown begins vocalizing in scales that no human ear should endure. This is meant to realign your chakras, balance your bile, and scare away evil spirits hiding in your colon. You try to meditate. Instead, you reflect on how much money Romans were willing to spend to be emotionally pulverized in luxury. But perhaps the most unexpected spa treatment? Insult therapy. A tradition borrowed from Greek cynics and somehow fully embraced by Roman elites. You sit on a cushion while a specially trained insulter hurls deeply personal critiques at you. Things like, your nose is the size of a senator's ego. Your mother must have paid Jupiter for your face, and he gave her change. You exfoliate like a barbarian and dress like a Gaulish scarecrow. The idea is to harden your mind, boost your resilience, and also maybe cry in private later. This is wellness, Roman style. By the end of the day, you've been cooked, cursed, wrapped, scrubbed, bitten, serenaded, insulted, oiled, painted, and philosophized within an inch of your existence. You are lighter, possibly because you've lost actual weight through sweat and fear. And yet, despite the absurdity, the pain, the expense, and the faint chemical burns, there's something strangely satisfying. Roman spa culture wasn't about comfort, it was about conquest, of the body, of the senses, and of boredom. Because if you're not actively suffering in pursuit of pleasure, are you even Roman? As you step out into the dusky streets of the empire, you smell like 7 different gods and your legs tremble from the weight of enlightenment. You've survived the goose, the laurel, and the lemur, and you've done it all in the name of beauty, power, and a really confusing afternoon. And best of all, tomorrow you get to do it again. Because nothing says peak civilization quite like spiritual screaming and urine facials. You wake up the next day sore in places you didn't know existed. Your hair smells like crushed laurel leaves and goose breath. Your skin glistens like an over-polished statue. And your soul, well, your soul is somewhere between stoic detachment and full-blown trauma bonding with the spa floor tiles. But of course, you go back, because it's ancient Rome, and the only thing more addictive than wine is wellness that feels vaguely like warfare. Today's session starts with a niche service gaining traction among Rome's most flamboyant elite, bloodletting for balance. You've heard the rumors. One senator swears it cured his gout. Another claims it helped him win at dice. Either way, you find yourself sitting on a marble bench while a man with a questionable beard, half doctor, half amateur exorcist, ties a leather strap around your arm and mutters about excessive melancholy. A small incision, a bronze bowl, some concerned glances. You're told this will release the black bile and restore your harmony. You feel dizzy, not from the blood loss, but from the realization that somehow this is still considered leisure. To replenish your vital essences, you're taken to a recovery lounge stocked with snacks. Unfortunately, these snacks include raw sea urchin, fermented goat liver, and something described only as Pontic rejuvenation paste. You nibble a date and pretend it's enough. Next comes one of the spa's most bizarre innovations, the whisper chamber. It's exactly what it sounds like. A domed marble room where clients recline on cushions while attendants whisper affirmations, flirtations, or light gossip directly into your ear. Some patrons prefer compliments. Your skin gleams like Venus at dawn. Others prefer slander. Everyone knows your last banquet ended in fire and disappointment. You choose the mystery option and are serenaded with alternating facts about the Punic Wars and unsolicited beauty advice. It's deeply confusing, strangely comforting. Now, just when you think the Romans couldn't possibly invent another way to combine narcissism, suffering, and body oil, they do: bronze fire cupping. A treatment said to pull out impurities by setting tiny bronze cups on your skin with flaming wicks. This is managed by a slave named Clavius who, judging by his scars, has had a few mishaps. The cups sizzle. Your back is soon covered in what feels like hot metallic jellyfish. The pain is sharp but fleeting. The bruises, however, will stay for weeks, like badges of honor or evidence. To distract from the searing sensation, the spa offers what it calls oral restoration. A band of musicians appears, playing Roman reed flutes, water organs, and a lyre shaped like a giraffe. The music is allegedly tuned to the frequency of Jupiter's favor. It mostly sounds like bees having an argument. You survive, barely. Next, hair removal. The ancient way. Forget razors. That's for cowards and Gauls. Romans use a depilatory paste made from burnt snail shells, arsenic, and vinegar. It smells like betrayal and burns like heartbreak. You sit stoically as it's smeared across your legs, arms, and, if you're truly brave, your underarms. The paste is left to bubble while the cosmetae recite odes to hairlessness. Then it's scraped off with a dull seashell. You emerge smooth as a marble bust and equally expressionless. By now, your tolerance for pain is high, but you've yet to reach the final level, the Roman detox purge. This involves lying down on a mosaic floor while a specially trained attendant, known as a vomiter, yes, really, feeds you salted plums, honey wine, and crushed figs until your body rejects everything you've ever eaten. It's not elegant, it's not subtle, it's certainly not hygienic, but Romans believed a good purge cleared both the body and the conscience. You throw up somewhere between the figs and the honey, and the vomiter pats your back like a proud uncle at a gladiator match. Once cleansed, you're treated to a final rinse in the frigidarium of eternal judgment, a freezing plunge pool surrounded by statues of Roman gods who stare down at your shivering form like disapproving ancestors. The water is glacial, the floor is slippery. You make it 5 seconds before sprinting out, gasping and possibly swearing in 3 dialects. You're dried with cloths soaked in saffron water. You're massaged with almond oil and pounded lightly with sticks of perfumed wood. You are declared rebalanced. You are not sure what that means anymore. At the very end of this odyssey, you're handed a tiny clay tablet bearing your name, the spa's seal, and a list of your completed treatments, like some horrible bingo card of suffering and status. As you shuffle out of the marble inferno, blinking into the Roman sun, you overhear new clients arriving. They're excited, hopeful. One asks about the sacred goose. Another inquires about a new celery enema technique. You want to warn them, but you also understand, because you'll be back. Yes, you'll complain, you'll whimper, you'll pay half a year's salary to be insulted, burned, and mildly poisoned, but you'll come back, because this is ancient Rome. And in Rome, self-care means screaming internally while smiling externally. It means pain is prestigious and agony is aromatherapy. And it means spa days aren't so much about pampering as they are proving you can survive beauty as a blood sport. So light that incense, scrub that shame, and remember, if it doesn't hurt, you're not doing it right. Ave, wellness. Av, chaos. Av, Roman spa. Picture yourself 9 months pregnant in a one-room cottage that smells like damp straw and miracle failure, surrounded by relatives debating whether your labor pains are punishment for Eve or just bad luck. Welcome to medieval childbirth, a high-stakes gamble where the midwife doubles as a folk magician. The priest stands by with holy water, and everyone else argues about which saint handles breech babies fastest. You've barely finished your morning chores, hauling water, milking goats, maybe fending off a Viking raid, when the first contraction hits like a blacksmith's hammer to the spine. There's no hospital, no epidural, and certainly no privacy. Word travels faster than the plague. The wife of Thomas the Thatcher is taken. Within minutes, half the village women cram into your cottage carrying beeswax candles, stale bread, and unsolicited opinions. Someone throws a blanket over the only window. Darkness keeps out evil spirits and, coincidentally, fresh air. Now the room is lit by flickering tallow that smells like roasted mutton fat, because nothing says calm like laboring in a medieval barbecue pit. The midwife, Matilda, rumored to have delivered more babies than the local priest has delivered sermons, arrives with a leather bag of tools, rusty scissors, a wooden spoon, a strip of wool soaked in wine, and a handful of charms stitched from leftover relics. She checks your pulse by grabbing your wrist for exactly 3 seconds, nods gravely, and announces you'll give birth by nightfall if God wills it. It's 7 a.m. Your scream of protest counts as confirmation. Before anything else, protocol demands a spiritual tune-up. A neighbor recites the Ave Maria so loudly the rafters vibrate. Another pins a scrap of the Virgin's veil, bought off a traveling pardoner who also sold dragon teeth. Above the doorway, someone hangs a key around your neck. Symbolism varies, but generally it unlocks the birth canal. Meanwhile, Aunt Agnes sprinkles salt at the threshold to keep out demons, cats, and that one gossip who swears labor is contagious. You're guided to the birthing chair, a wooden throne with a strategic hole in the seat, splintered from generations of service. The chair tilts slightly forward to harness gravity, because medieval engineering knew at least one thing about pain management: make it brief by making it vertical. You grip the armrests, carved with cheerful images of saints who ironically died childless, and brace yourself. Matilda spreads her tools on a board. There's a pewter bowl of goose grease for lubrication, a strip of linen to bite when the pain peaks, and a flask of strong ale to warm the spirit. You gulp it like courage incarnate. It tastes equal parts yeast and regret. Outside, the village men pretend to work while actually placing bets on whether the baby comes before the chickens roost. Contraction 2 hits harder. Matilda kneads your lower back with fists that feel like granite. She chants a half-Latin, half-nonsense rhyme taught by her own master midwife, who learned it from a nun who claimed she'd seen an angel's obstetric manual. The words promised to loosen the bones and soften the gates. You would settle for a blunt rock to the head. Between waves, the women fuss over talismans. One ties a red wool thread around your thigh to ward off the wandering loon, a condition physicians insist causes hysteria, fainting, and any behavior they find inconvenient. Another waves burning sage. Smoke coils like a dragon looking for an exit. The priest finally enters, brandishing a silver crucifix and muttering blessings too quietly to understand. He's nervous, too. Medieval theology says death in childbirth wipes away sins, so technically you're a martyr in progress. Pain ramps up. The chair creaks ominously. Matilda uses a horn listener, basically a funnel, against your belly, nods and declares the baby's heartbeat, strong as a smithy bellows. Encouraging, though no one can hear anything over your screaming. She orders you to change position, squat beside the bedposts, lean forward, breathe like a bellows yourself. You obey, knees shaking. A cousin supports your shoulders. Her breath smells of onion soup and sympathy. Hours pass in a blur of sweat, prayer, and medieval life hacks. They give you a slice of warm cheese to fortify the blood. They sponge your forehead with vinegar water to cool the humors. Someone pours holy water onto the floorboards, slippery now, but swears it helps the baby slide out. The logic is, biblical meets slapstick. Suddenly, the midwife's face shifts from calm to command. She feels the crown. Push with the strength of Saint Margaret, she orders. Saint Margaret, patron of childbirth, famously burst from a dragon's stomach. Inspirational, if anatomically confusing. You bear down until the world narrows to roaring in your ears. The women chant, clap, and occasionally scream for you, because clearly the noise level wasn't high enough. A wet, visceral moment later, the head emerges. Matilda rotates shoulders with the precision of a carpenter aligning dowels. One more contraction, one primal howl, and your child spills into her hands. The room freezes, then erupts in cheers, sobs, and the sound of Matilda slapping the baby's back to clear its lungs. A thin wail pierces the smoky air, proof of life stronger than any relic. But ceremonial timing isn't finished. Infant souls hover in limbo until baptism, so the priest races forward with a pewter ewer. He dribbles a blessed water over the newborn's forehead, murmuring Latin while trying not to trip on the goat-chewed rug. Congratulations. Minutes old, your child is cleansed of sin it hasn't had time to consider. Meanwhile, you're not done. The afterbirth arrives with less fanfare but equal importance. Superstition dictates the placenta be buried under the threshold so the baby always returns home. A teenage helper rushes the bundle outside, nearly colliding with a passing pig who thinks it's lunch. Crisis averted, familial loyalty supposedly secured. Matilda stitches a small tear with catgut, humming a lullaby no baby remembers but every mother clings to. She checks for fever, feels your pulse, and declares you likely to survive. An honor not guaranteed. Statistically, 1 in 3 medieval mothers won't see their child's first birthday party, which itself usually involves more funerary black than cake. You're carried to a straw-stuffed mattress for the lying-in period, 40 days sealed indoors to heal, bond, and avoid male gaze. The room is kept warm by a fire and several bodies. Ventilation is a myth. Midwives rub your belly with rosemary oil to prevent womb wandering, then wrap it tightly in linen strips, medieval Spanx. They serve you broth thick with parsley and saffron, expensive spices signaling you're loved or at least socially valuable breeding stock. The baby is swaddled like a sausage in cloth bands, arms pinned to mimic womb snugness and discourage demon tampering. A charm, a tiny iron knife, dangles from the cradle to stab evil spirits. If the child's a boy, visitors make jokes about future plowing prowess. If a girl, they comment on dowry savings accounts. Either way, neighbors sneak in to assess the newborn, mutter blessings, and secretly rate the infant's potential on a scale of robust plow hand to future miracle saint. Night falls. The birthing chamber finally quiets. Someone blows out candles, leaving only hearth glow and that sweet sour scent of new life mingled with old sweat. You hold your swaddled miracle, half terrified, half triumphant, fully exhausted. Outside, a wolf howls across the valley. The church bell tolls Compline, and the midwife dozes upright, clutching her payment. A chicken, a loaf of rye, and the village's gratitude. Tomorrow brings milk fever scares, unsterilized knives, and a husband who thinks rocking a cradle counts as parenting. But for now, in the smoky hush, you breathe the first peaceful breath since dawn. Childbirth in the Middle Ages may be a carnival of anguish, superstition, and questionable hygiene, but against all odds, you and your tiny co-survivor made it through the first act. And the midwife mutters, half asleep, "Rest, girl. Next time might be easier." No one believes her, least of all you. But hope, like infection, spreads quickly in the dark. Dawn leaks through the shutter cracks like a nosy neighbor, and the smell of damp straw, half-burned tallow, and boiled fennel drags you out of what could generously be called sleep. Your newborn has 2 settings, squeak and banshee, and right now it's banshee, practicing lungs that might one day shout at cows. Your husband, Thomas the Thatcher, pretends to help by announcing, "The child cries," as if you've gone deaf overnight. Satisfied with his diagnostic brilliance, he shuffles outside to check the thatch he abandoned yesterday when labor began. By custom, inconvenient tradition, men stay busy elsewhere, claiming their presence would upset the humors. You suspect the only humor in danger is theirs. Inside, the birthing room has transformed into the recovery suite, which is to say someone changed the straw, and a neighbor lit fresh juniper branches to cleanse the air. The smoke coils against the ceiling, fights with the chimney draft, loses and settles in your lungs like regret. Matilda the midwife reappears after a 4-hour catnap, her hair wired in every direction, her apron bearing proof of lives delivered and breakfasts ignored. She checks your pulse, still miraculously inside you, and inspects the baby's swaddle for omens. A hiccup is good, a sneeze is excellent, a suspicious silence is caused to bang pots until noise resumes. Hiccups abound, you pass. Next on the medieval postpartum checklist, colostrum. Everyone agrees the first milk is powerful, so powerful some believe witches might steal it if you're careless. To be safe, Matilda murmurs a charm, circles your breasts with her finger 3 times, and spits sideways to confuse lurking spirits. Then she positions the baby. Latching hurts like a demon with garlic fingertips, but you're assured pain builds character and immunity to envy. Failure to produce milk within the hour could invite accusations of sin, so you pray harder than you did during labor. The flow begins, thin, yellow, miraculous, and the women cheer, like you've birthed gold. Technically you have. Rumor says a drop of colostrum can cure a king's gout, though no one's tested the market rate. While the baby nurses, village women raid your pantry for the lying-in feast. Tradition demands feeding the mother rich foods to rebuild blood, which means stewed pottage thick with marrow, honey-soaked bread, and an egg poached in spiced wine. You swallow spoonfuls between contractions of afterpain, uterus reminders that it's still spring cleaning. Each cramp arrives with a chorus of, "That's a good sign, it means your body's closing the door so cold winds can't blow in." You decide medicinal ignorance is bliss if it comes with honey. A knock rattles the doorpost. Father Clement returns, holding a ledger and a fragile smile. Time for paperwork, medieval style. He records the child's baptismal name, chosen last midnight in a scramble between contractions. You picked Agnes after the aunt who supplied onion-scented encouragement, or Matthew if it had been a boy. Naming quickly is critical. High infant mortality means saints get a heavy workload. He dips a quill in ink made from oak galls and scribbles your daughter's entry, blotting the parchment with a scrap of lamb's wool. He offers blessings for milk flow, stable temperatures, and no visits from the mare, the night demon who sits on chests and steals breath. The parish budget doesn't include anti-mare insurance, so prayer will have to do. Day 3 ushers in visitors bearing both gifts and germs. First is Lady Eleanor from the manor, carried on a litter by 2 sweating servants. She bestows a silver penny, impressive generosity, and a lecture on noble birthing tapestries, as if you'd ever own a wall big enough to hang one. Next comes old Hilda with a bundle of nettle leaves to keep fevers away. You thank her and hide them under the mattress. Sleeping on nettles seems counterproductive, but so is arguing with someone rumored to hex cows. Finally, the village herbalist, Brother Giles, arrives. He offers a salve of goose grease, chamomile, and questionable optimism, meant for nipple cracks and with different packaging, horse harnesses. Despite these ministrations, the threat of puerperal fever looms like a thundercloud. No one calls it that. They call it childbed ague or hot womb sickness. But every mother knows the signs: foul smell, sweating chills, delirious prayers. Matilda inspects your linens twice daily, sniffing like a bloodhound and nodding if they smell merely awful instead of ominous. She boils her scissors over the hearth and wipes her hands with wine, a sanitary sensation so avant-garde it borders on witchcraft. Most midwives skip such luxury. Matilda lost a sister to childbed fever and now treats cleanliness like a saintly relic, rare, revered, and dangerous to discuss in public. On the 7th day, tradition demands church bells ring a virgin's peal to celebrate surviving week 1. You're still confined to bed, but the sound drifts through the shutter gaps, mingling with rooster crows and the dull thump of Thomas hammering reeds onto rooftops. Matilda allows you to sit upright for stitching chores. Small tasks keep the mind from wandering into melancholy, that sinister humor blamed for mothers who drift into silence and stare at walls for hours. She hands you a scrap of linen and colored threads to embroider the baby's initial. You jab the cloth, pretending each stitch traps a worry inside. Nights blur. Baby Agnes develops a knack for screaming each time the hearth coals fade. You rock her in a wooden cradle strung from the ceiling beam, pushing with your foot while half asleep. Thomas offers to help once, pats the cradle twice, decides he lacks the necessary anatomy, and resumes snoring. You envy his oblivion until you remember he's considered the village catch, one with a roof overhead and only mild halitosis. Your standards, like the straw, have settled. Around day 10, Matilda suggests the baby needs swaddling practice outdoors. Fresh air toughens lungs and exposes infants to the communal immune system, which is basically everybody else's coughs. You bundle Agnes like a turnip in layers of wool, tie a puffball cap under her chin, and hobble outside. Spring mud clings to your shoes. Geese hiss territorial oaths. Neighbors crowd around, rating her robustness. "Good color," says one. "Strong cry," says another. "Looks just like her father's father," adds a third, ensuring Thomas's lineage remains uncontroversial. Someone discreetly lifts the baby's swaddle to peek for a call. If she'd been born with a bit of membrane on her head, sailors might pay handsomely for it as a drowning charm. Alas, no extra revenue today. Back indoors, Matilda introduces belly binding, a wide wool band wound tight around your abdomen to restore pre-pregnancy shape. critical since a woman's worth is partly measured by how quickly she can re-enter fertility negotiations. She cinches until you wheeze, then loosens half a finger breadth for breathing privileges. You're told the wrap supports your back, keeps your organs from wandering, and discourages you from laughing too hard. Laughter, apparently, might jostle the womb out again. You vow never to smile. Day 14 marks the first official bath. Water is heated in an iron cauldron, poured into a barrel lined with clean straw, a luxury given the fuel it consumes. Matilda checks the temperature by plunging her elbow like a domestic oracle. Satisfied, she eases you in, warns against fainting, and dumps a mug of rosemary infusion over your hair. The steam lifts away 2 weeks of smoky residue and maybe a little dignity. Mid-soak, she hands you a pumice stone for calloused heels. Beauty cannot wait for convalescence. Agnes gets a sponge wipe and warm beer. Beer is safer than water, and she smells like a tiny pub patron for hours. 3 weeks pass, milk flows, stitches itch, life resumes its plodding medieval rhythm. But one rite remains, churching, the purification of mother before rejoining society. Until then, you're considered spiritually leaky, a walking invitation to misfortune. On the 40th day, weather permitting, you don a freshly laundered kirtle, pin a veil over hair that hasn't seen a comb since Candlemas, and limp to St. Swithin's. The congregation stares, part awe, part shrewd inventory of your survival status. Father Clement meets you at the porch, sprinkles holy water, and recites Psalm 116. You light a beeswax candle in gratitude, and for a moment forget the aches. During Mass, Agnes hiccups 3 times. Someone whispers it's the Trinity blessing. You pray the rumor sticks. After service, village women admire your color, pale but not ghostly, and debate weaning schedules. Some suggest introducing mashed turnip at 4 months. Others swear by chewed bread at 6 weeks. You nod while planning to follow Matilda's simpler rule. Feed the baby when she screams, and guess right half the time. The lying-in period officially ends that afternoon. Thomas hosts a modest ale-splashed supper, pottage, rye bread, a pot of honey, and the pigeon pie, saved for special victories. Neighbors toast to your health, Agnes's future, and Thomas's luck, because raising a daughter means one day collecting a dowry. You smile politely, clutch the baby, and calculate how many pigeons it'll take to keep dowry wolves at bay. As candles burn low, Matilda approaches with final advice. First, drink nettle tea each new moon to freshen the blood. Second, carry a sprig of rue against sudden cramps and gossip. Third, remember childbirth is easier next time. You snort loud enough to jostle pewter cups. She winks. You realize the joke is that there will always be a next time until menopause or misfortune intervenes. Night deepens. Guests stumble home, singing psalms off-key. Thomas clears trestles, muttering that Agnes looks strong enough to fetch water by Michaelmas. You place the sleeping bundle in her cradle, secure the iron knife charm, and sink onto the mattress. Your body radiates exhaustion like a hearth brick after the flames die, yet your mind spins with future terrors, plague, famine, accidental bewitchment, stepping on a rusty nail. Survival feels provisional, a contract renewed daily with sweat, prayers, and Matilda's dodgy stitches. Still, you've done the impossible under impossible odds. In a world where half of everything dies early, crops, dreams, sometimes kings, you and Agnes are alive, wrapped in a blanket of improbability and goat wool. Outside, an owl hoots. Inside, Matilda snores. Thomas finally says, "Thank you," softer than straw settling. You close your eyes, uncertain what dawn brings, but certain you'll meet it, head-on, catgut threads and all. Because medieval motherhood doesn't grant holidays, only chapters. And somewhere beyond the thatched roof, the sky churns with stars named after saints who never experienced childbirth, yet supposedly guard it. You decide to claim one anyway, just in case. After all, if a scrap of wool can unlock a birth canal, a distant pinprick of light might guide you through whatever harrowing miracle the Middle Ages plans next. By the start of your 2nd month postpartum, your body feels less like a battlefield and more like the trampled field after the war. Quiet, lumpy, and suspiciously uneven. You've resumed your household duties, which means hauling water from the communal well, chopping leeks while the baby wails, and pretending you don't smell faintly of milky despair. Rest is a luxury for noble women and corpses. Your breast, once considered mysterious portals of life, now resemble medieval wineskins, overused, frequently leaking, and inspected by elderly women who offer unsolicited advice like, try humming a church hymn while nursing, babies latch straighter. You've also learned the hard way that cabbage leaves inside your bodice help ease engorgement, though they also make you smell like a walking stew. Your husband suggests it's wholesome. You suggest he try it. The community expects you to bounce back into productivity faster than a market piglet. Your weaving must resume. After all, nakedness is only fashionable in hell, and your lentil pottage can't stir itself. And should you fall behind, you'll hear it from 3 directions. Your mother-in-law, who had 12 children and only whined through 11, the local gossip circle, whose ears are sharper than their bread knives, and the parish priest, who thinks sloth is one of the original sins against both God and linen production. Your baby Agnes, meanwhile, is thriving. She's got the lung capacity of a church organ and sleeps in 15-minute intervals, timed perfectly to coincide with your attempts to knead dough or not sob. Matilda, your midwife, still drops by occasionally, mostly to inspect Agnes's fontanelle, the soft spot on a baby's head that she swears predicts everything from rainfall to future marriage prospects. Matilda also brings charms stitched into cloth, to keep the devil from pulling the soul out through the nose, she explains, as though this is a frequent concern. One day, Agnes sneezes 3 times in a row. You brace for plague. Matilda claps. She's blessed, she says. Triple sneezes drive out bad spirits. You're skeptical. You've seen the pig sneeze once and get better housing as a result. Still, you mark it on the wall with a piece of charcoal next to other milestones. First scream, first smile, first time projectile spit landed on the cat. And then there's the issue of birth spacing, or lack thereof. In the Middle Ages, the space between one child and the next was measured not in years, but in whether your last stitches had fallen out yet. Nobody really understands ovulation. They just assume your body resets like a harvest cycle. The church officially frowns upon contraception, unless you count just being incredibly unlucky. But village women know better. You hear whispers about potions made from willow bark, dried beaver testicles, or stuffing wool soaked in wine into delicate places. You're tempted to try them all simultaneously. You learn to negotiate time around your baby's mysterious moods. When Agnes gurgles contentedly, you sprint to grind grain or scrub lice from the bedding. When she screams, you bounce her with one arm and stir soup with the other. One day, while nursing, you manage to pick fleas off the dog and repair your only clean chemise. You realize this is multitasking in its purest form. No one claps. There's no applause in medieval motherhood, only survival. Every now and then, you visit other new mothers. There's Elspeth, who just delivered twins and speaks exclusively in moans. There's Maud, who swears by binding her infant in a goose-down burrito and hanging it near the hearth like an herb bundle. And there's poor Alice, whose child passed in the night, still swaddled and silent. You bring her bread and avoid eye contact, because grief is contagious here, like gout or heresy. In a society where 1 in 3 children die before reaching adulthood, mourning is a quiet, practiced ritual. There's no funeral unless the baby was baptized. If not, they're buried without ceremony, sometimes in the corner of the churchyard, sometimes beneath the hearth, so their soul can stay close. You wonder if that's comforting, or just superstitious interior design. You do everything to keep Agnes alive. She's swaddled so tight her arms have forgotten how to flail. Her cradle is kept off the floor to prevent rats, scorpions, and the occasional jealous spirit. You leave garlic over the doorway, and hang an iron horseshoe above her bed, and never say she's pretty aloud, because compliments invite fairies. You refer to her only as that loud little toad, or the bald shrieking bundle, just to be safe. Matilda checks in again, this time inspecting your pelvis like a property inspector looking for damage after a festival. She declares you healed enough, and mutters something about ripened hips. You realize she's implying you're ready for round 2. You feel like smothering her with your cabbage leaf bra. Your churching ceremony has passed, which means you're no longer unclean and can return to the community. Your first event? A baptism for your neighbor's 7th child. The priest botches the name, again, and the water is suspiciously tepid. But the crowd applauds when the baby cries, because silence is death and noise is health. You smile, nod, and try not to think about how this cycle loops endlessly, generation after generation, like a poorly written morality, Play where women bleed, groan, and pray, and no one changes the script. As Agnes nears her 3rd month, you hit a strange turning point. You begin to recognize her different cries. The "I'm wet" whimper, the "I'm hungry" scream, the "I've decided I hate existence" wail. She smiles more often, though it might just be gas. She grabs at your finger and holds on with surprising strength. It's the first time you feel something like hope that isn't immediately followed by terror. And just in time, too. Because a rumor begins to stir in the village. A tax collector is coming, and he's counting households by heads, living and not. Thomas begins preparing a sign for the door, something like "No plague here," with aggressive underlining. You consider making your own new mother inside. Enter and be smitten with guilt. That night, as you rock Agnes to sleep, you realize something. There is no maternity leave in the Middle Ages, no village daycare, no quiet sanctuary to weep from exhaustion without being accused of demonic possession. But there's resilience. There's Matilda's grim smile, the way women leave food at your door without asking, the way Agnes now gurgles like she's trying to sing Gregorian chants. There's humor too, absurd, tired, cabbage-scented humor. And maybe that's what keeps you going. Not just love, not just duty, but the knowledge that in a world where your only spa treatment is a half-boiled bucket of rosemary water, and your only therapy is whispering complaints to a sheep, you can still laugh, quietly, bitterly, with cracked lips, but laugh all the same. Because if childbirth didn't kill you, motherhood definitely will try. And in the Middle Ages, trying is the closest anyone gets to a miracle. By midsummer, the world has changed its colors, fields gone from damp brown to riotous green, skies stretching so blue you could believe in mercy again. Agnes is 6 months old now, plump as a harvest pear and just as sticky, with fists that insist on sampling every available texture. Your veil, the cat's tail, a dubious clump of dirt. She survives on your milk, stolen naps, and the collective willpower of a village, determined not to tempt the infant mortality statistics. You, meanwhile, survive on thin ale and the reckless optimism that surely nothing else can go wrong this season. Wrong naturally accepts the invitation. It begins with a knock at dusk, a muffled rap of urgency rather than courtesy. You open the door to find Matilda the midwife, cheeks flushed, apron already blood-dappled. "It's Elspeth," she says, breath hiccuping between words. "Twins again. Only this time, one sideways and the other's impatient. I need hands." You hand Agnes to Thomas, who grips the baby like a freshly caught eel, and follow Matilda across the muddy lane toward Elspeth's cottage, heart hammering in a rhythm you hope never to feel again. Inside, the air is thick with candle smoke, iron tang, and prayers recited so fast the syllables blur. Elspeth lies draped over the birthing chair, eyes wild and knuckles bone-white on carved armrests. The first twin crowns, but the second is tangled. "Bridge," they whisper, as though naming the devil summons him closer. You remember your own labor and feel sympathy morph into dread. Matilda thrusts a bowl of boiled linen into your hands. "Cool compresses," she orders, and if the second doesn't turn, we brace for the worst. The worst means forceps, if available, or desperate manipulation, or a whispered last rite. You press cloth to Elspeth's brow, feel her sweat seep through, and murmur the same nonsense Latin chant Matilda muttered over you. It has no documented efficacy, but it fills the space where terror would otherwise bloom. Somehow, St. Margaret's intercession, brute force, or sheer defiance, the second twin somersaults at the final moment. 2 mewling daughters arrive into Matilda's trembling hands, proof that even medieval odds can roll double miracles. The room exhales as one organism. Elspeth weeps from relief or shock, hard to distinguish. You remain until the afterbirth, until the linen-soiled pile is burned in the hearth, until Matilda ties little wool threads around miniature wrists and declares both souls properly tethered to flesh. Only then do you realize your shift is soaked in someone else's story. You return home before dawn, skin coated in vernix and ash, mind ping-ponging between awe and horror. Thomas watches you scrub at the courtyard pump. His face carries a look you can't parse. Respect, fear, or the dawning comprehension that childbirth isn't just women's business, but raw elemental warfare fought with bare hands and faith scraps. He reaches for the bucket. You let him help, Summer ripens, grain heads bow heavy, parasites and rumors breed in equal measure. Agnes cuts her first tooth on the rim of Thomas's pewter cup and promptly develops a fever. Matilda prescribes a poultice of mashed fig and ground pearl. You substitute crushed eggshells, no one is that wealthy, and suggests tying a wolf fang around Agnes's neck to draw out fire humors. Instead, you dampen linen in cool water, rock her through the night, and draft private deals with every saint on the roster. Spare the child, take the cabbages, the pig, the next 5 years of sleep. By dawn the fever breaks, leaving only sweat-damp curls and your hollowed relief. Yet Matilda's fang talisman finds a buyer anyway. Lady Eleanor, who visits under pretense of Christian charity, but mostly to gauge your progress like livestock. She flutters around Agnes, declaring the child robust yet unfortunate in looks. Perhaps she'll become a nun. You swallow retorts with practiced grace. Lady Eleanor's gossip travels faster than plague flees, and you still need her occasional pennies for cloth dye. Before leaving, she asks if you plan another soon. Children close together strengthen the household, she chirps. You imagine hurling her into the duck pond, but etiquette, and the potential for future silver, prevails. Not long after, whispers reach you of a woman 3 villages east accused of sorcery. Her crime, losing 4 infants in succession. The priest proclaimed a divine judgment. Neighbors convinced themselves she'd bargained with hell. She was marched to the river for an ordeal by water. Tied, thrown in, dragged out only when float versus sink became irrelevant. Either way, the verdict is guilty. Her midwife disappeared shortly after, maybe fled, maybe buried in some anonymous ditch. The story chills you deeper than winter wind. In this world, survival isn't just biology. It's politics stitched to superstition. One bad turn of the moon, and any mother can become a monster in someone else's ledger. Autumn creeps across the fields, coloring hedges with fire and decay. Agnes toddles now, more stumble than stride, but each wobble is cheered by half the hamlet. You should feel triumphant. Instead, your belly churns with morning nausea familiar as a childhood tune. The wool binding you've worn since Agnes's birth no longer fastens without protest. You count back nights, recall Thomas's harvest festival grin, the jug of cider, the reckless forgetfulness when the moon and marital obligations aligned. Pregnant again. Matilda confirms with a nod after palpating your abdomen. Small as a barley sprout, she says, but sprout it will. She reads your face. Not the news you hoped? You shrug, eyes stinging. Love the child, yes. Fear the battlefield, absolutely. She squeezes your hand, murmurs that 2 births in quick succession aren't ideal but not impossible. Eat oats. Rest when you can. Pray if it helps. Swear if it helps more. You decide to do both. Agnes weans abruptly, your milk soured by pregnancy or her own growing independence. You brew thin gruel from barley and goat milk. Feed her with a hollow-handled spoon Matilda carved to monitor portions. Each meal is gamble. Too thin and she starves, too thick and her stomach rebels. Lady Eleanor suggests imported sugar to fatten her cheeks. You laugh at the absurdity, then secretly barter 2 skeins of linen for a pinch of the precious crystals. Agnes makes a face like a startled hedgehog at the sweetness, but finishes the bowl. You tuck the empty spoon away like relic evidence of maternal ingenuity. Your second pregnancy passes in a blur of fatigue and fainting spells. Unlike Agnes's swelling, which crept slow as dawn, this child declares sovereignty early. Hips ache, back knots, iron tang returns to your tongue. Thomas tries to lighten your load, though lighten is relative when thatch repairs and harvest loom. He learns to rock Agnes, pinch lice, even heat compresses for your aching breasts. The village women gossip that he's bewitched. A husband so helpful must be under spells. You almost wish it true. Winter arrives sharp and uninvited. Food stores shrink faster than daylight. Agnes catches a cold that rattles her ribs like dice. You knit her tighter wraps, burn rosemary, plead silently. She pulls through, but your nerves fray. Matilda checks your pulse, prescribes nettle soup for strength, lectures Thomas on procuring more firewood. He returns with splinters in his palms and a near-frozen rabbit for stew. You want to praise him, curse him, and cry all at once. Instead, you sew gloves to cover the splinters and pray the rabbit isn't some noble's property. The second labor begins on a night when frost sketches fern patterns over every surface. You wake to the now familiar vice grip inside your spine, taste fear like burnt cloves. Agnes sleeps bundled against Thomas on the far wall. You envy her ignorance. Matilda arrives quickly. She'd taken to sleeping with one boot on during recent weeks, sensing your time near. The room is quieter than last labor. Fewer women fit inside the cottage, now thick with stored grain sacks. Aunt Agnes, the namesake, watches the fire with salt poised, ready to fling at any shadow that moves wrong. This child comes faster. Second births often do, but with speed comes violence. Contractions slam one after another, denying rest. You grip the bedpost, the birthing stool long since cracked beyond repair. Matilda coaches breathing patterns that feel like drowning. Blood pools more than last time. She frowns, presses a cloth to stem the flood. Somewhere beyond the roaring in your ears, Thomas is pacing the frozen yard, whispering deals with any deity willing. Then a gush, a cry, a weight placed upon your belly, a son, slick and furious. Relief is a fleeting guest, chased away when the afterbirth drags its heels, tethered by stubborn tissue. Hemorrhage threatens. Matilda packs linen pads steeped in crushed yarrow, mutters prayers half genuine, half coercion. You fade, swim somewhere dark until cold vinegar on your lips hauls you back. Bleeding slows, pulse steadies, living isn't guaranteed, but for now the ledger remains open. They name him Gilbert after Thomas's father, securing family pride and potential inheritance of precisely one thatched roof. Baptism happens by lamplight, priest summoned from his bed, muttering less Latin than last time, perhaps too sleepy to remember full rites. Still, a splash counts in heaven's bureaucracy. Gilbert howls, lungs clear, darkness recedes. Recovery, however, is treacherous. Your milk returns grudgingly, shared now between two hungry mouths. Winter colds prowl, midwives themselves succumb. Matilda catches a chill that settles in her chest. She crawls to your bedside one bitter morning, hands you her horn listener. "Time I rest," she wheezes. "Village needs another to hear the future." You protest. Midwifery is legacy earned with decades of screams and stitches. She only smiles, wheeze, coughs, a laugh. You've the spine for it, and the memory of pain. She passes before a Candlemas, buried with the three charms she trusted most: holly leaf, bronze strigil, and knotted red thread. Father Clement reads a shaky eulogy. Half the village attends, women clutching children she once delivered. You stand near the fresh grave, Agnes on one hip, Gilbert in a sling, and realize the mantle has indeed fallen across your shoulders like an unwelcome cloak. Spring returns, muddy, hopeful, full of birds singing, as if death were merely a winter myth. You heal slowly, thicker scars now crisscrossing flesh and psyche alike. Agnes speaks first words, bread and no, while Gilbert discovers his own feet, kicking everything within sandal range. Thomas repairs the birthing stool, jokes about its future workload. You throw a spoon at him, then laugh because arithmetic says you're likely only halfway through your childbearing years. Yet fear no longer rules the house. You keep Matilda's listener beside the hearth, practice hearing tiny heartbeats in stuffed rags, memorize herbs that staunch bleeding, learn the rhythm of uterine massage. Neighbor women start tapping your door at odd hours, asking advice. Is this cramp normal? Does this swelling foretell twins? You answer cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. Every life you help usher safely feels like another shield laid piece by piece over your own children. Sometimes, in quiet dawn moments, you imagine future centuries where childbirth happens in clean rooms with bright lights, where pain can be dulled, germs chased out by invisible potions, babies weighed on scales instead of guesses. You can't picture the machines, but you picture the mothers, upright, breathing, more alive than afraid. You hope some echo of your struggle reaches them, a reminder that progress is mortar mix from countless anonymous sacrifices. For now, you settle Agnes onto a bench beside the spinning wheel, nurse Gilbert until he drifts drooling asleep, and step outside as sun breaches the thatch line. The air smells of thaw and manure and possibility. You are tired, scarred, cabbage-scented, and indomitable. Medieval motherhood remains a relentless siege, but you've survived 2 campaigns and claimed a banner stitched from sweat and stubborn joy. Somewhere over the ridge, church bells begin to ring. Maybe a marriage, maybe another birth, maybe just the hour. You adjust the sling, square your shoulders, and start walking toward the sound, ready to lend your hands, your herbs, your hard-won knowledge. Because here, in the perilous Middle Ages, life insists on arriving, and someone must always greet it, bloody, breathless, and laughing at the odds. And this time, that someone is you. Picture thousands of armored pilgrims marching under a blistering Levantine sun, shouting Deus Vult, while smelling like week-old goat cheese left inside a blacksmith's apron. Welcome to the Crusades, where a battlefield hygiene was less rinse and repeat, and more pray the lice don't stage a coup before we reach Jerusalem. You wake before dawn to the angelic sound of a trumpeter with bronchitis announcing matins. Your camp is a sprawling patchwork of tents, half-built wooden palisades, and puddles that whisper tetanus. The ground is hard, your blanket is damp, and you've just slept wedged between a sack of moldy grain and a knight who snores in Latin. You open your eyes, inhale, and immediately regret every life choice that led you here. The air is thick with wood smoke, hoarse sweat, and the kind of body odor that could exorcise demons by sheer force. First order of business, breakfast, and personal grooming, though in Crusader terms, those are strangely intertwined. You gnaw on stale trenchers dipped in weak ale, which doubles as hydration and mouthwash. For dental care, you scrape your teeth with a twig until your gums bleed just enough to convince you something productive happened. A squire passes around a common comb carved from bone. Everyone takes a turn raking it through hair alive with lice, then wipes the teeth on a tunic sleeve slick with yesterday's mutton grease. This ritual might spread plague faster than gossip, but at least it bonds the unit. Sanitation is theoretically handled by designated gong farmers, unlucky lads whose job is digging latrine trenches downwind of camp. In reality, soldiers relieve themselves wherever the spirit moves them, behind supply carts, inside abandoned helmets, occasionally right where they stand if the enemy launches a surprise volley. The stench drifts across the bivouac like a miasma of collective sin. Commanders try issuing fines, but coins change hands slower than dysentery spreads. Everyone quickly learns to walk with their mouth shut and sandals higher than hope. If you crave a proper wash, you head for the communal water barrels. Rainwater mixed with debris, horse drool, and the ghosts of better hygiene days. You splash this dubious potion on your face, creating mud streaks stylish enough to fool yourself into thinking you look battle-ready. Some knights swear by rosewater shipped from Constantinople, but after 3 weeks the vials run dry and desperation sets in. Soon, even the nobles are rubbing themselves with sand like dusty cats, hoping friction counts as cleanliness. Armor maintenance is its own aromatic saga. Chainmail soaks up sweat like a crusader soaks up sermons. Rust blooms overnight, turning every hauberk into a wearable cheese grater. You oil your rings with rancid lard because olive oil is too precious for anything but last rites. The lard melts under the sun, mixing with perspiration to create a film that smells like a slaughterhouse in July. By midday, flies orbit you with religious devotion, mistaking you for a carcass that prays. Between marches, you visit the surgeon's tent. Surgeon is generous. He's usually a barber with a hacksaw and a list of saints to invoke. He sharpens his knives on the tent pole, wipes instruments on his beard, and insists wine is both anesthetic and antiseptic. Soldiers queue to have arrowheads removed, boils lanced, or teeth yanked before they rot clear to the soul. You watch one poor lad bite on a leather strap while the barber surgeon scoops gangrene from his foot with a spoon that still holds yesterday's pus. When it's your turn for a blister lancing, he nods, praises God, and proceeds without washing his hands. You close your eyes and recite every prayer you know, even the ones for fish harvests. You need all the help you can get. Water discipline is a theological debate. Priests preach purity of spirit, commanders preach purity of stream. Unfortunately, the nearest river doubles as the army's laundromat, abattoir, and corpse disposal site. Upstream, you collect water. Midstream, you wash tunics in it. Downstream, you dump the unlucky who died overnight. To make it safe, you boil it with wine or a pinch of salt, then cool it in goatskin canteens that once held lamp oil. The aftertaste is character building. Speaking of laundry, the few who attempt it become pariahs. Washing a gambeson, a padded linen jacket stuffed with wool, takes hours, several buckets of water, and more arm strength than siege engineering. Most soldiers simply air their gambesons over campfires, smoking out fleas and infusing the fabric with a bouquet of pine tar and sweat. When flames scorch a sleeve, they call it ventilation. Flea bites turn into ulcers, ulcers into infections, infections into opportunities for pious reflection. Monks traveling with the host insist suffering unites believers with Christ's passion. You're not convinced Christ ever had trench foot, but existential objection takes a back seat to survival. You smear sulfur salve on your ankles, wrap them in rags, and pray the next town's well isn't cursed. Bathing, when practiced, is either in rivers thick with silt or in makeshift bathhouses run by local entrepreneurs, usually widows who charge a silver penny to sit in a tub of lukewarm water shared by 4 men at once. The first bather leaves the tub grayish, the last one leaves fermented. Soap is rare, mainly animal fat blended with lye that still contains charred bones. You rub it on and hope your skin doesn't slough off like battle-damaged parchment. Shaving is a sign of discipline, but blades dull fast in the desert air. Many crusaders opt for the pilgrim beard, which is just letting everything grow until ravens could nest in it. Beards collect food scraps, lice egg clusters, and the occasional sand granule, big enough to classify as terrain. When a knight's beard finally tangles into his mail links, squires cut it free with daggers, then braid the salvage into lucky charms. If the beard falls out in patches from malnutrition, nobody mentions it. They're too busy hiding their own bald spots. Inside the siege lines, hygiene hits rock bottom. Trenches overflow, bodies pile, and water gets rationed to a gulp per man per day. You wipe sweat from your eyes and realize your fingertips are black with grime that might be ash, might be plague fleas, or might be yesterday's breakfast if you're unlucky. Disease doesn't wait for an invitation. Dysentery marches faster than cavalry. Whole companies drop to the bloody flux, doubling over behind shields while arrows whistle overhead. Medics prescribe pomegranate peels and vinegar, but mostly they prescribe burial shrouds. Crusader diet doesn't help. Salt pork, hardtack, onions, and whatever forage the quartermasters scrounge make up 95% of meals. Fiber is legendary, scurvy inevitable. A knight famous for killing 3 Saracen champions collapses one morning because his gums detach from his teeth, victim of vitamin deficiency. The camp surgeon pulls all remaining molars to prevent further decay, then cauterizes the sockets with a hot iron branded with a cross. Holiness, he says, lives in the wound. Yet despite the rot, crusaders improvise coping mechanisms. Some chew fennel seeds to mask breath fetid enough to qualify as siege weaponry. Others dangle lavender sachets from their belts, hoping fragrance offsets the aura of doom. A few visionary souls adopt Eastern hygiene tricks, rinsing hands before meals, burning scented wood chips to fumigate tents, even brushing teeth with salt and vinegar. They are mocked for heathen habits, until plague bypasses their quarter of camp and heads toward the holy and filthy sections instead. Night brings its own odorous symphony. Fires crackle, fat drips onto embers, and warriors snore beneath stars indifferent to their plight. You roll onto your side, scratch at flea bites, and listen to a sermon about humility delivered by a priest who hasn't washed his cassock since Antioch. Somewhere a dog howls, maybe at nearby jackals, or maybe at the smell wafting off your socks, which you haven't removed since leaving France. Before sleep claims you, you attempt a quick devotional cleanse. Splash a handful of wine over your face, wipe with a sleeve, cross yourself, and lie back on a bedroll, damp with condensation and despair. Tomorrow, you'll storm a wall, or dig another latrine, or bury more comrades, whichever comes first. But right now, in the fetid stillness, you reflect on how penance was supposed to purge your sins, not your epidermis, and how a hot bath might convert more souls than any sermon ever preached. Still, faith and filth march together, and as you drift into uneasy dreams filled with clashing steel and buzzing flies, you realize the Crusades aren't just a holy war. They're a nose-pinching pilgrimage through humanity's eternal struggle to stay alive without smelling like the dead. So sleep tight, brave pilgrim. At dawn, the trumpet will sound, the lice will celebrate, and God's allegedly on your side, though you suspect even he's keeping his distance from the stench. Dim the lights, let the fan hum, because now we're marching straight into one of the foulest, filthiest chapters of the Crusades, siege warfare. Where soap is a rumor, wounds are a buffet for flies, and half the army dies in a latrine trench before even seeing the enemy's wall. So, you made it through the march. You didn't die of dysentery or get eaten alive by fleas. Congratulations. Now you're stuck in the Middle East, camped outside a city full of angry defenders hurling stones and night pots over the walls. Welcome to the siege of Jerusalem, or Antioch, or Acre. Honestly, it doesn't matter. The setting may change, but the smell stays the same. Your day begins the same way every siege day does, sweating through your linen undershirt before the sun even rises. The air tastes like ash, old garlic, and the kind of body odor that can make your eyes water. Inside your tent, you've got 3 companions, a dented helmet full of ants, a bucket you call a toilet, but let's be honest, it gave up weeks ago, and a cot infested with straw mites. One of your tent mates already has trench fever. Another just lies there mumbling to Saint Sebastian while scratching boils. You step outside into a sea of canvas, flies, and despair. Crusader camps were not exactly well engineered. Trenches overflow. Food rots. Corpses wait days to be buried because the gravediggers keep getting arrowed. The smell is a brutal cocktail. Human waste, horse dung, spoiled meat, and the acrid sting of old blood. It clings to your skin like judgment. You'd give your last coin for a bar of soap, or even just a breeze blowing the stench in a different direction. Morning hygiene routine, still the same. Splash questionable water on your face. Use your dirty cloak as a towel. Pick bread crust out of your beard. Run a comb through your hair, if you're fancy, or just shave it all off with a dull knife to discourage lice. That doesn't work, of course. The lice just migrate south. As for the latrines, you'd be better off holding it until next month. Digging proper pits was a good idea in theory. In practice, most soldiers just squat behind their tent or use the nearest dry ditch. By midday, every low spot in the camp turns into a bubbling brown hazard zone. And if you think people clean themselves after relieving their bowels, think again. Toilet paper? Not invented yet. Leaves? Rare in a rocky desert. Your left hand? Bingo. Which is why some crusaders greet each other with a right-hand handshake and a suspicious glance. Let's talk water. Oh, water. Sweet, possibly cursed, bacteria-rich water. You're supposed to boil it, but firewood's scarce and fuel is often made from, you guessed it, dried dung. So you drink it straight and hope for the best. You could purify it with wine, but you drank all the wine last week because the siege was boring and morale was collapsing. Now, you're downing brackish slime from a camel trough, wondering whether that squirm in your gut is hunger or a worm hatching. Then there's the food situation. Remember when you had stale bread and onions? You miss those days. Now you're gnawing on salted horse meat, chewing leather boots, or grinding tree bark into porridge. One guy swears he roasted a rat and dipped it in vinegar. Another guy is just eating the vinegar. At one siege, crusaders were rumored to have eaten their own dead, roasting bodies on makeshift spits when rations ran out. Of course, they blamed it on the desperate, but you've seen the look in men's eyes after 3 weeks of nothing but weevil bread and boiled shoe sole. And food poisoning? Let's just say if it doesn't kill you, it makes you wish it had. The vomit to latrine ratio in camp is tragic. One knight writes in his journal that his comrade died from overconsumption of rancid butter and unblessed fish. What a way to go. Infections are everywhere. The smallest cut, maybe from adjusting your armor, can become a festering ulcer the size of a coin. No antibiotics, no gauze, just rags soaked in wine, honey if you're rich, or holy water if you're desperate. The preferred treatment method? Pour something that burns into it and scream through the pain. Cauterization is always on the table, usually administered with a red-hot blade straight from the campfire. Oh, and if your wound starts smelling worse than everything else around you, that means it's infected and you've got about 3 days left. Let's not forget skin conditions. You've got heat rashes under your armor. You've got fungal infections between your toes. Your thighs are chafed raw from marching in damp wool leggings. Sunburns crack your scalp. Blisters rupture and fill with pus. One day, you look at your foot and realize it's gone gray. The surgeon offers to cut it off. His tools? A cleaver and a prayer. As for medical professionals, well, calling them doctors is generous. Most are monks, barbers, or elderly men who read a few Latin scrolls and decided they were qualified to remove spleens. The only qualification needed to practice medicine during the Crusades was a high tolerance for screaming and a complete disregard for germs. Instruments weren't sterilized. They were wiped on dirty tunics, dipped in boiling water, rarely, or left in open air near rotting meat. You went in for a toothache and came out without a jaw. Now, let's talk baths, or the lack thereof. Water is scarce. Bathing is discouraged. Many crusaders believed full-body bathing weakened the soul or opened the pores to demonic influence. Some knights proudly claimed they hadn't washed in 6 months. Others smeared themselves with oils to cleanse without water, then scraped the oils off with knives and threw the muck onto the camp path. If you did find a clean pool or stream, odds are it was already used as a horse trough or a field hospital. Inside the cities under siege, hygiene doesn't fare better. Defenders suffer from the same plagues: lack of water, overflowing waste, and close quarters turning neighborhoods into breeding grounds for disease. When one city finally fell, crusaders reported ankle-deep filth in the streets, piles of unburied dead, and fountains choked with refuse. Jerusalem may have been the holy city, but in 1099 it smelled like the devil's laundry hamper. And speaking of Jerusalem, let's not romanticize it. When the Crusaders finally took it, they didn't stop to clean themselves before the massacre. They stormed in covered in sweat, grime, and blood, and then added more blood to the mix. Chroniclers claimed the streets ran with gore, up to the bridles of horses. Others said you could smell the city from miles away. That's not just poetic exaggeration. When thousands of bodies decompose in the heat, mixed with burning wood, spilled waste, and boiling animal fat, it creates a miasma strong enough to knock out a bishop. Soldiers vomited, horses panicked, even the hardened warriors gagged behind their helmets. Yet through all this, the myth of nobility persisted. Crusaders still believed they were the chosen of God, anointed to suffer for holy purpose. Some believed their filth was sanctified, that going unwashed was a sign of penitence. Others simply didn't care. As long as they held a relic, kissed the right cross, and said their prayers before battle, their hygiene, or lack thereof, would be forgiven. But not everyone was convinced. Some Arab chroniclers watching from the walls called the Crusaders barbarians of filth, wild men who reeked of sweat and death and carried disease like a curse. When negotiations failed and cities fell, many defenders weren't just afraid of swords, they were terrified of the smell. By the end of the siege, even the survivors looked like walking corpses, sunburned, bug-bitten, half-starved, and caked in so much filth their original hair color was a mystery. Some had lost toes to frostbite in the mountains. Others had lost their minds from fever, but they had taken the city, and now they could wash themselves, in blood, in smoke, or if they were lucky, in a half-empty fountain surrounded by corpses. So, as the moon rises over the Holy Land and the stench of conquest settles like fog, close your eyes and be thankful, because you, dear listener, can sleep in clean sheets with clean water, far from latrines filled with horror and men brushing their teeth with sand. Next time, we'll dive into what happened after the fighting stopped, when hygiene, politics, and betrayal clashed in the boiling heart of Crusader kingdoms. Spoiler alert, the bath still sucked. Sweet dreams, and may your blanket never smell like a battlefield. So the battles are done, the cities are taken. Jerusalem, Antioch, Edessa, they're all yours now. You survived the marches, the dysentery, the dehydration, and the siege rations. Surely now comes the part where you wipe the grime off your brow, slip into a nice cool bath, and enjoy the perks of your new holy kingdom, right? Right? Well, only if you consider living in a slowly decaying, disease-ridden oven while being nibbled by lice and trying not to get assassinated by your own allies a perk. Let's take a little scented stroll through the Crusader states, those little pockets of supposedly civilized Christian rule carved into the Middle East. They were called things like the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the County of Tripoli, the Principality of Antioch, and they all had one thing in common. They were built on a foundation of chaos, blood, and feces. So much feces. First, the cities. These weren't empty, sparkling trophies waiting for new management. They were crowded, chaotic places full of people who did not ask for any of this. The Crusaders who stayed behind, because yes, many just turned right back around and booked it back to Europe, had to govern cities where they didn't speak the language, didn't know the customs, and absolutely didn't care about the local plumbing. Water? You're still boiling it. Or not. Pipes, aqueducts, and fountains built by earlier Muslim dynasties or the Romans might still function, unless the Crusaders wrecked them during their liberation. So most people fetched water from open wells or reused what little rainwater they could collect, and that's if you lived near a city center. If not, you were back to sharing streams with donkeys and hopeful corpses. As for sanitation, let's just say the Holy Kingdom was a mess. Most Crusader towns didn't have proper sewage systems. Waste disposal looked like this. You flung your business out the window and hoped it didn't land on a bishop. Alleyways were puddled with urine. Gutters ran thick with black sludge. On a hot day, the air shimmered not with holiness, but with the unmistakable stench of human decay. And bathing? That's a complicated story. Because here's the weird part. Public bathhouses existed. In fact, Crusaders were shocked to find that Muslim cities had a whole bathing culture. Steam rooms, massages, scented oils, and even towels. Towels for drying oneself. Mind-blowing. In places like Damascus, Cairo, and even Jerusalem before the Crusaders came along, people bathed regularly. Not just nobles, everyone. There were separate hours or entrances for men and women. There were elaborate rituals for cleansing, relaxing, and even medical treatment, and it was considered not just normal, but respectful to others to be clean. Naturally, Crusaders found this suspicious. To a lot of medieval Europeans, regular bathing seemed sinful. After all, what was cleanliness but vanity? Weren't these bathhouses just brothels with more steam? Some theologians even warned that hot water opened the pores and let in evil spirits. Bathing too often was a sign of weakness, or worse, heresy. So when the Crusaders took cities with operating hammams, public baths, they often didn't use them, or they burned them down, or they let them rot and turned them into stables or storage rooms. Others were repurposed into churches or military barracks, because nothing screams holy conquest like converting a marble bathhouse into a place where knights hang their crusty socks. Not everyone agreed, though. Some of the Crusader elite, especially those who married local noblewomen or had actual contact with Arab culture, started to come around. They saw the logic. They maybe even snuck off for a soak when nobody was looking. Chroniclers whisper of Templars getting massages, of knights daubing themselves in scented oils, and of bishops dipping their toes in warm baths and sighing, well, maybe just this once. But these were exceptions, not the rule. Most Crusader cities saw a steep drop in public hygiene. Without trained staff, with damaged infrastructure, and with a population that neither bathed nor brushed, towns quickly devolved into pestilential warrens. Vermin thrived, flies clouded the markets, dead animals were often dumped just outside the gates, within easy sniffing distance of your local church. Let's visit a Crusader house, a nice one. You walk in, stone floors, maybe a few rushes scattered around, a table with crusted dishes, a wooden bucket for washing hands and face, filled with gray water that's been used all morning. The kitchen, a smoke-filled corner where fish is drying, bread is molding, and something in a jar is definitely moving. There's no toilet, that's outside, or possibly just a hole in the floor. If you're rich, you might have a chamber pot. If you're really rich, you have a servant to empty it. If you're poor, well, let's just say the walls weren't white when you moved in, but they're looking worse now. And what about personal hygiene? Let's start at the top. Literally, your hair. Most Crusaders kept their hair longish and oily. Shampoo didn't exist. Soap existed in theory, but good luck getting it. So most just brushed it out with a comb, if they had one, and occasionally rubbed in ashes or vinegar to refresh it. Lice? A permanent accessory. You could try shaving your head, but then you'd look suspiciously like a monk, or worse, someone who thinks hygiene matters. Beards were both fashion and protection. Shaving required razors, hot water, and time. Most men just let it grow, crusty and proud. You might wash your face before prayers, you might rinse your hands before eating, but a full body scrub, only if you fell into a river. Teeth cleaning was medieval. Some rubbed charcoal on their teeth, some chewed sticks, others just didn't. Breath like a tomb and gums like inflamed sausages were pretty normal. You'd only visit a barber surgeon when your tooth hurt enough to make you cry, and then the solution was rip it out with pliers and scream into your jerkin. Clothing? Filthy. You had maybe one set of good tunics and a few linen undershirts. Laundry was rare and done in boiling water with lye, if you could get either. More likely, you wore the same tunic until it could walk off on its own. Undergarments were changed more often, maybe every few weeks. Now, ladies, women in the Crusader states fared only marginally better. Noble women might bathe once a month, peasant women a few times a year. Menstruation was managed with rags, moss, or nothing. Midwives dealt with childbirth in dark, smoky rooms with no running water, using knives that had last been cleaned by shouting prayers at them. Babies were born into filth and baptized before they could catch a disease from the floor. And let's not forget disease itself. Leprosy was common. So was tuberculosis, typhoid, and dysentery. Some towns had lazar houses, quarantine zones for the sick, but these were often just plague pits with a roof. Medical knowledge in the Crusader states was creative. Some doctors had read Arabic texts and adopted hygiene practices from Muslim physicians. Others still believed illness came from demons and bad smells. Treatments ranged from useful, honey, herbs, to unhinged, drinking gold powder, snorting ashes of saints, or putting a live pigeon on your face. In the end, the Crusader states became a strange blend of cultural borrowing and stubborn filth. They lived next door to civilizations with libraries, running water, and public health systems, and still insisted on keeping their own medieval European grossness intact. Because why take a bath when you can die a martyr? So sleep well tonight, knowing that while the Holy Land might have been soaked in blood and blessed with relics, it wasn't exactly spa material. The next time you light a candle and pour a warm bath, remember the poor knight sitting on a dung heap in Acre, rubbing oil into his lice-covered hair, wondering if maybe the locals had a point, because tonight we bring this fetid, festering journey to an end, not with a holy trumpet blast, but with the groan of a constipated camel, the rattle of disease-ridden lungs, and the gentle squelch of yet another crusader stepping into his own waste. We've survived the marches, the sieges, and the clean kingdoms. Now it's time to witness the downfall, not just of a handful of castles and cities, but of the entire Crusader dream. And while historians will argue about politics, battles, and betrayals, we both know the truth. Hygiene, or the sheer lack of it, helped kill the Crusades. Let's begin where all bad things do, in the latrines. As the decades wore on, the Crusader states fell into bad habits. Their infrastructure crumbled, their soldiers grew complacent, their rulers argued more about crowns than clean water. Castles were built, yes, but not all had working sewage. Some used cesspits, others simply drained into the moat, which was then used to draw water for cooking. You don't need a medical degree to guess how that turned out. The noble cities, Jerusalem, Acre, Tripoli, became overcrowded cesspools. Refugees poured in from the countryside. Merchants packed the markets. And yet, public sanitation? Barely addressed. Waste overflowed in alleyways. Rats multiplied, flies swarmed. And into this mess came the Crusaders' most terrifying enemy, epidemic disease. Let's talk about Acre, a port city, the last major Crusader stronghold. By the late 1200s, it was packed tight with soldiers, pilgrims, monks, and horses, all living within walls that reeked like a medieval dumpster fire. Pigs roamed the streets, open sewers ran beside taverns. Water sources were polluted with everything from manure to decomposing body parts. When outbreaks of dysentery hit, people collapsed in the road, clutching their stomachs and trailing brown filth. Hospitals. They existed, but many became death houses, overrun by disease and unable to keep up. Corpses stacked like firewood. Linen bandages were reused. Surgeons rinsed knives in buckets of rainwater and dove into the next patient. Infection was the rule, recovery the miracle. And then came leprosy again. An old scourge, sure, but now it spread fast in crowded cities where no one bathed and everyone shared fleas. Crusader society, already obsessed with sin and purity, freaked out. Lepers were shunned, herded into colonies outside city walls, where they died quietly, away from the stench they had ironically escaped. It wasn't just the poor. Nobles got it too. Even knights swaddled in silk and chainmail couldn't fight microbes. One chronicler describes a valiant lord who rotted alive, one finger at a time, until his bones poked out like bird claws. They say his last words were, "Bring me wine and holy oil." The wine was for the pain, the oil probably didn't help. Meanwhile, the locals, Arabs, Turks, Persians, watched from a distance, aghast. These invaders who claimed to be God's army lived like animals. They didn't wash, they dumped waste in wells. They spread lice, plague, and blasphemy. One historian wrote, "They conquer cities but cannot conquer their own filth." But let's not forget the infighting. Disease weakens the body, but filth weakens society. The Crusader nobles, now long settled in the Levant, were more interested in squabbling with each other than defending their land. Hygiene reflected this decline. Monasteries once known for their order now had lice-infested dormitories. Castles once proud of their latrines now had privy towers, collapsed and overflowing. Priests gave sermons while the faithful scratched at their boils and tried not to faint from the odor. And when new crusades arrived waves of reinforcements from Europe, they often brought worse conditions. Many were poor, untrained, unbathed. They marched thousands of miles, arrived half dead, and immediately started dying again of starvation, disease, and yes, hygiene shock. Locals wouldn't house them. Hospitals couldn't treat them. Even veteran crusaders sometimes refused to share quarters, fearing plague. And speaking of plague, it was only a matter of time. In 1347, about 50 years after the fall of Acre, the Black Death swept through Europe. But long before that, smaller waves of bubonic plague likely rolled through the Crusader states. Carried by fleas on rats aboard trading ships, it found a welcome home in the unwashed armpits of Crusader strongholds. Imagine it. You're a merchant arriving at Acre. You step off your ship and into a city already moaning with sickness. Corpses float in the harbor. The fishmongers are selling eels that look suspiciously like sewer leeches. And just as you reach your inn, the man beside you collapses, bleeding from his nose. You order wine. You wonder if the wine jug was washed. You drink it anyway. It doesn't help. When the Muslim armies finally returned to reconquer their lands, they didn't always need to fight. Sometimes, the cities were so weakened by disease and internal collapse, they fell with barely a scream. Or, in the case of Acre in 1291, they fell hard a last desperate battle fought by filthy, exhausted knights surrounded by flames, flies, and filth. As the Mamluks stormed the city, some crusaders leapt into the sea rather than die in the mud. Others tried to hide in church basements, where they suffocated in their own waste. And what was left? Rubble, bones, smell. The Mamluks burned what they didn't need. They tore down the fortresses, they purified the cities, rebuilt the baths, re-established clean fountains and aqueducts. It wasn't perfect, but it was cleaner. Meanwhile, back in Europe, the idea of bathing was still suspect. Some returning crusaders had learned the benefits of cleanliness, but many were too scarred to care. They brought back relics, stories, and in some cases, new diseases. The dream of a holy empire in the East had ended, not with righteous glory, but with an empty wine flask, a fevered groan, and one last lice scratch. So, what do we learn from all this? That hygiene matters. That even in the age of swords and saints, the real killers were often invisible in your hands, in your water, inside your clothes. That the Crusades weren't just undone by politics, or betrayal, or brave enemy generals. They were undone, in part, by stench. And so, as your room cools, and the blanket softens, and the modern world hums gently outside, breathe in deep, clean air, fresh sheets, a hot shower waiting for you tomorrow. No maggoty bread, no buckets in the corner, no boiling lice in your boots. Because you're not a crusader. You're safe, and you're clean.